The mine foreman's laughter still rang in Eliza's ears as she stumbled through knee-deep snow, her lungs burning with each frozen breath. Behind her, torchlight flickered between the pines, men on horseback hunting her like an animal. Her stepfather had sold her for 3 months' worth of whiskey and a cleared debt. She was 18 years old, and tonight she would either freeze to death in these mountains or live long enough to become something she could never escape. The choice seemed simple. Death was kinder than the fate waiting in Iron Hollow Ridge. Before we begin this journey together, I want to invite you to be part of this story's reach. If this tale moves you, please like this video and comment with the city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel and whose hearts they touch. Now, let's step into Eliza's world. The wind screamed through the canyon like something alive and hungry. Eliza Carter pressed herself against the rough bark of a pine tree, her breath coming in ragged gasps that turned to white mist in the darkness. Her fingers, numb inside her mother's threadbare gloves, clutched the small canvas bundle that held everything she owned: a spare dress, a piece of hardtack bread, the silver locket her mother had pressed into her palm the night she died. Keep running, don't stop, don't look back. Behind her, the shouts of men echoed off the stone walls of the mountain pass. They weren't far, maybe half a mile, maybe less. In the darkness and snow, distance became meaningless. She can't have gone far. The voice belonged to Bull McCready, the mine foreman, a man whose hands were as heavy as his temper. Worthless girl's probably frozen already. We still got to bring her back. That was her stepfather, Frank Carter, his words slurred with drink even now. I gave my word to McCready. A deal's a deal. Eliza's stomach turned. A deal. That's all she'd ever been to Frank, a burden inherited when he married her mother, a debt to be paid when her mother died of fever 3 years ago. And tonight, in the smoky darkness of the Iron Hollow saloon, she'd heard the whole ugly truth. The girl's 18 now, Frank had said, counting coins across the scarred wooden bar. Old enough? You want her, she's yours. Clears my tab and then some. McCready had grinned, showing teeth stained brown with tobacco. Bring her to my cabin tomorrow night. I'll make sure she earns her keep. The memory sent a spike of rage through Eliza's chest. Rage hot enough to burn through the fear, at least for a moment. She pushed away from the tree and kept moving, her boots sinking into snow that rose past her ankles. The terrain climbed steadily upward, away from the mining camp, away from the valley, away from everything she'd ever known. She had no plan, no destination, no survival skills beyond what any girl raised in a rough mining town might pick up by necessity: how to make a fire if she had dry wood, how to recognize a few edible plants in summer, how to keep quiet and invisible when men were drinking. None of that would save her now. The forest pressed in on all sides, dark trunks rising like prison bars against the night sky. Overhead, clouds blocked out the stars. Snow fell steadily, soft and relentless, already covering her tracks. That was good. That might save her. But it also meant the temperature was dropping fast, and she had no shelter, no fire, no way to last until morning. Just keep moving. Movement means warmth. Warmth means alive. Her mother used to say that cold was a quiet killer. It didn't announce itself with fangs or claws. It simply waited, patient, inevitable. And when you finally stopped moving, it wrapped around you like a lover and pulled you down into sleep you'd never wake from. Eliza stumbled over a hidden root and went down hard, her knee cracking against stone beneath the snow. Pain shot up her leg. She bit down on her lip to keep from crying out, tasting blood. For a long moment she stayed there on her hands and knees, breathing hard, listening. The voices had faded. Maybe the men had turned back. Maybe the storm had convinced them she wasn't worth the trouble. Or maybe they were just being quiet now. Hunting smart. She forced herself to stand. Her knee throbbed but held her weight. She limped forward, one hand against the trees for balance, the other clutching her bundle. The wind cut through her wool coat like it was made of paper. Her toes had gone numb an hour ago. Now her fingers were following. The ground beneath her feet began to slope more steeply. She was climbing without meaning to, following some animal instinct that said, higher ground, get above them. The trees thinned. Rocky outcrops appeared, black shapes against black sky. The wind grew stronger, no longer buffered by the forest. That's when her boot caught on something, a root, a rock she never knew, and suddenly there was nothing beneath her. She fell. The world tumbled, sky, ground, snow, stone, all spinning together in a chaos of cold and impact. She hit something hard that knocked the air from her lungs, then rolled, then hit again. Her bundle flew from her grip. She scrabbled for purchase, but found only loose scree that gave way beneath her hands. Then she stopped. For a moment, Eliza just lay there, stunned, staring up at the falling snow. Everything hurt. Her ribs, her shoulder, her head. She tried to sit up and the world tilted sideways. Nausea rose in her throat. Get up, you have to get up. She managed to roll onto her side. She was lying at the base of a steep slope she must have tumbled down, surrounded by rocks and sparse brush. Her bundle was gone. Her coat was torn at the shoulder. One glove had ripped open, exposing her hand to the wind. Panic hit then, sharp and cold. She had nothing. No food, no extra clothes, no fire-making supplies. Those had been in the bundle. Just the clothes on her back and the locket around her neck. No, no, no! The words came out as a whimper. She tried to stand, but her knee gave out and she collapsed again. The pain was worse now. Maybe she'd twisted it. Maybe broken something. She didn't know. She only knew that she couldn't walk, and she was alone on a mountainside in a snowstorm with men hunting her and night closing in. This is how I die. The thought arrived with strange clarity. Not dramatic, not tragic, just factual. She would die here, and in the morning they might find her frozen body. Or maybe they wouldn't. Maybe the snow would cover her and she'd just disappear. One more forgotten girl from a forgotten mining camp. Frank wouldn't mourn her. McCready would curse the loss of his prize, and the world would keep turning. Something inside Eliza rebelled against that ending. She'd survived 18 years of Frank's cruelty, survived her mother's death, survived the mining camp's harsh winters and harsher men. She'd survived by being small, by being quiet, by never causing trouble. And tonight she'd finally stopped surviving and started fighting. She wasn't going to quit now. Eliza gritted her teeth and began crawling. She didn't know where she was going. She just moved, dragging her injured leg, pulling herself forward by her hands. The snow was deeper here, drifted against the rocks. Her exposed hand burned with cold. She kept moving. The landscape around her was nothing but shadows and shapes. She crawled past a boulder, past a twisted juniper tree, past rocks that jutted from the earth like broken teeth. Then she saw it, a darker shadow against the darkness, a gap in the rock face barely visible through the falling snow, an overhang, maybe even a shallow cave. Shelter. She crawled faster, ignoring the pain, ignoring everything except that opening in the stone. When she reached it, she found it was deeper than she'd hoped. A genuine rock shelter, maybe 8 feet deep and 5 feet high, formed where a massive boulder had come to rest against the cliff face eons ago. Eliza pulled herself inside and collapsed. The wind still reached her, but it was muted now. The snow fell at the entrance but didn't penetrate far. It was perhaps 5 degrees warmer than outside. It wasn't enough. She was soaked through, shaking violently, her teeth chattering so hard she thought they might crack. Her wet clothes were stealing what little heat remained in her body. You have to get dry. You have to get warm. But she had no fire, no way to make one, nothing dry to burn even if she did. Eliza curled into a ball, trying to preserve what heat she could. She pulled her torn coat tight around her shoulders. She tucked her hands under her arms. She tried to stop shaking, but her body wouldn't obey. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The sound was lonely and strange. She thought about her mother. Margaret Carter had been a Boston school teacher who'd married a charming prospector and followed him west, only to discover too late that he was better at drinking than finding gold. When he died in a mine collapse, she'd married Frank because a woman alone with a child had few choices. She'd spent her last years washing laundry for miners and coughing blood into handkerchiefs she tried to hide from Eliza. "You're stronger than you know," her mother had whispered near the end, her hand cold in Eliza's grip. "When the time comes, don't be afraid to run." Well, she'd run, and now she was dying anyway. The irony would have been funny if she'd had the energy to laugh. Time stopped meaning anything. Eliza drifted in and out of consciousness, her thoughts fragmenting. She saw her mother's face, saw Frank's sneer, saw McCready's hands reaching for her, saw snow and darkness and the silver locket gleaming against her mother's throat. What's in the locket, Mama? A reminder of who we were before we forgot. I don't understand. Someday you will. Eliza's hand moved to her own throat, finding the locket there. It was the one thing she hadn't lost. Her frozen fingers fumbled with the clasp, but couldn't open it. She gave up. The shaking was getting worse, or maybe it was getting better. She couldn't tell anymore. She closed her eyes. The sound of footsteps and snow woke her. For a moment, Eliza thought she'd dreamed it, but then it came again, the soft crunch of boots on frozen ground, deliberate and steady. Coming closer. Terror shot through her like lightning. They found me. She tried to move, to crawl deeper into the rock shelter, but her body wouldn't respond. Her limbs were leaden, useless. She could barely turn her head. A figure appeared at the entrance of the shelter, backlit by the gray light of early dawn. Tall, broad-shouldered, carrying something. Please, Eliza's voice came out as barely a whisper. Please don't. The figure crouched down and moved into the shelter, and Eliza saw him clearly for the first time. Not Frank, not McCready, not anyone from Iron Hollow Ridge. The man was perhaps 30 years old with copper skin and black hair worn long and tied back. His face was angular, watchful, marked by weather and sun. He wore buckskin clothing layered against the cold and carried a rifle slung across his back along with what looked like a rolled hide and a leather pack. Their eyes met. His were dark, unreadable. Not cruel, not kind, just assessing. He saw everything in an instant. Her torn clothes, her injured leg, her blue-tinged lips, the violent shivering she couldn't control. He set down his pack and unwrapped the hide, which turned out to be a thick buffalo robe. Don't. Eliza tried to form words, but they scattered like leaves. Don't touch. He ignored her feeble protest and wrapped the robe around her shoulders, then pulled her into a sitting position against the rock wall. His movements were efficient, impersonal. He wasn't trying to comfort her. He was trying to keep her alive. From his pack, he produced a leather water skin and held it to her lips. Drink. His voice was low, accented. English, but shaped by another language underneath. Eliza tried to push it away, but he held it firm. Drink or die. Choose. The bluntness of it shocked her into obedience. She drank. The water was cold and tasted of leather and minerals. It hurt going down her frozen throat, but her body absorbed it desperately. He let her drink for a few seconds, then pulled it away. Too much will make you sick. He set the water skin aside and began gathering rocks from around the shelter entrance, arranging them in a circle. From his pack he produced tinder, dry grass, and bark that he must have kept waterproof somehow. He struck flint against steel and within minutes had coaxed a small flame to life. Eliza watched through half-closed eyes as he fed the fire carefully, building it from flame to blaze. Heat began to fill the small space. Blessed, wonderful heat. She wanted to cry, but her eyes wouldn't produce tears. The man worked in silence, asking nothing, explaining nothing. When the fire was stable, he pulled out dried meat and began roasting it over the flames. The smell made Eliza's stomach clench with hunger. Who? She finally managed. Who are you? He glanced at her briefly, then back at the fire. Coda. Coda. She tested the name. You're, Apache? A slight nod. Why? Her thoughts were still sluggish, fighting through cold and exhaustion. Why did you help me? He turned the meat over the fire, considering his answer. The mountain does not care about our reasons. You were dying. I was here. It wasn't a particularly warm answer, but it was honest. They're looking for me, Eliza said. Men from the camp. If they find me, they won't find you. Such certainty. She wanted to believe it. Coda pulled the meat from the fire and tore off a small piece, offering it to her. Eliza took it with trembling hands and ate. It was tough and smoky, and the best thing she'd ever tasted. He gave her another piece, then water, then made her stop. Too much, too fast. You'll be sick. Eliza leaned back against the stone, the buffalo robe wrapped tight around her shoulders, the fire warming her face. For the first time since fleeing Iron Hollow Ridge, the shaking began to ease. Where is your camp? Coda asked. I don't have one. Your people? I don't have any. His dark eyes studied her. Not with sympathy exactly. more like curiosity about a puzzle he was trying to solve. You ran. It wasn't a question. Eliza nodded. They were going to. My stepfather sold me to a man, a cruel man. I couldn't. She stopped, swallowing hard. I'd rather die free than live as his property. Coda fed another branch to the fire. Sparks rose toward the rock ceiling. Death is easy, he said quietly. Living free is harder. I know. Do you? The question hung in the air between them. Eliza didn't know how to answer it. She'd thought running away was the hard part. She'd thought choosing death over submission was brave. Now, watching this stranger who'd saved her life for no reason, except that she'd needed saving, she began to understand that freedom wasn't a single choice. It was 1,000 choices, made every day, in the face of cold and hunger and danger and doubt. And she had no idea how to make any of them. I can teach you, Coda said, as if reading her thoughts. If you want to learn, teach me what? How to survive, how to live in the mountains, how to stop running. Eliza stared at him. Why would you do that? Coda was quiet for a long moment, his gaze distant, focused on something beyond the shelter's entrance. Because someone once did it for me. He didn't elaborate. Eliza sensed he wouldn't, not unless she earned that story somehow. Outside, the storm had passed. The sky was lightening from black to gray. Morning was coming, and with it, new choices. Eliza could try to make it on her own, could thank this strange, quiet man and stumble back down the mountain to… what? Another mining camp? Another town where she'd be just another girl with no family and no prospects? Or she could stay, learn, become something other than what she'd been. All right, she said softly. Teach me. Coda nodded once, as if they'd just sealed a contract. Rest now. When you wake, we'll see if you're strong enough to walk. Where are we going? My lodge. Higher in the mountains. You'll be safe there. Safe from what? From men who think you belong to them. Eliza pulled the buffalo robe tighter around her shoulders and watched the fire dance. She thought about Frank and McCready, probably still searching the lower slopes. She thought about her mother's locket pressing against her skin. She thought about this stranger named Coda who'd appeared out of the storm like something from a legend. And for the first time since running into the night, she allowed herself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she hadn't run toward death after all. Maybe she'd run toward life. When Eliza woke again, full daylight filled the shelter entrance. The fire had burned down to coals, but the space was warm, and she was wrapped in both the buffalo robe and what felt like another blanket. Coda sat near the entrance, working on something with his hands. As her eyes focused, she saw he was weaving thin strips of hide together, creating what looked like a brace or binding. Your knee, he said without looking up. It's swollen. You won't walk far without support. Eliza shifted, wincing as pain shot through her leg. He was right. Her knee felt like someone had driven a spike through it. How did you know? I watched you crawl into the shelter last night. I saw how you favored it. You were watching me? Alarm crept into her voice. I was tracking deer. Found your trail instead. Blood drops in the snow, broken branches, signs of a fall. Followed it here. He finished the brace and finally looked at her. The deer is long gone, but I found something more interesting. There was something almost like humor in his tone. Not quite a joke, but close. Eliza sat up slowly, testing her body. Everything hurt, but nothing felt broken except possibly her knee. Her head ached, her ribs were bruised. But she was alive and warm, and no longer shaking. Can you eat? Coda asked. Yes. He handed her more dried meat and a handful of what looked like dried berries. Eliza ate slowly, savoring each bite. When she finished, he brought the water skin again, and she drank deeply. Better, he said, observing her. Color's back in your face. Eyes are clearer. How far is your lodge? 3 miles, maybe 4. He gestured toward her knee. For you, with that injury, half a day's walk. We'll move slowly. What if I can't make it? Then we stop and rest. The mountain isn't going anywhere. His calm matter-of-factness was almost annoying. Eliza had spent her whole life around men who shouted, who swore, who solved problems with fists and threats. This quiet certainty was foreign to her. "I should warn you," she said. "The men looking for me, they're not good people. If they find your lodge, they won't." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true. My lodge is in a place only the people know. White men don't go there. They're afraid of the mountains, afraid of the spirits they don't understand." "Are there spirits?" Coda smiled slightly. "What do you think?" Eliza didn't know what she thought. Her mother had believed in God and prayer, though neither had saved her in the end. Frank believed in whiskey and cards. The miners believed in gold and luck. "I think," Eliza said slowly, "that if there are spirits, they're kinder than most men I've known." "Good answer." Coda stood and began packing his supplies. He scattered the fire coals and covered them with snow. Within minutes, the shelter looked as though no one had been there at all. "Can you stand?" he asked. Eliza pushed herself upright, using the rock wall for support. Her knee screamed in protest, but held. Coda moved to her side and wrapped the hide brace around her leg, securing it firmly. The pressure helped. "Try walking." She took a step, then another. It hurt, but it was possible. "I can manage. We'll see." He handed her a walking stick he'd cut from a branch, then shouldered his pack and rifle. Without another word, he stepped out of the shelter into the white world beyond. Eliza followed. The mountainside was transformed. The storm had passed, leaving everything buried under fresh snow that sparkled in the sunlight. The sky was a brilliant blue, so clear and vast it made her chest ache. Trees stood like sentinels, their branches heavy with white. It was beautiful, terrifying, empty. Coda moved through the landscape like he was part of it, his steps sure despite the deep snow. He chose a path that angled upward along the slope, avoiding the steepest climbs. Every few minutes he would glance back to check on her progress. Eliza gritted her teeth and kept moving. The walking stick helped, and the brace kept her knee from buckling, but each step was agony. Sweat soon soaked through her clothes despite the cold. After an hour, Coda stopped by a fallen log. "Rest." Eliza sank down gratefully. Her breath came in gasps. "Water." He handed her the skin. She drank, then looked around. The mining camp was far below them now, invisible through the trees. Up here, there was nothing but wilderness, ancient and indifferent. "How do you live up here alone?" she asked. "I'm not alone. The mountain is full of life. You just have to know how to see it." As if to prove his point, a hawk cried somewhere overhead. In the distance, the chatter of a squirrel echoed through the trees. "Where did you learn all this?" "From my grandfather, and his grandfather before him, and the grandfathers before that, going back to when the mountains were young." "You said someone taught you how to survive. Was that your grandfather?" Coda's expression shifted, not quite closing off, but becoming more guarded. "No, someone else, later." He didn't offer more, and Eliza didn't push. She understood about painful pasts you didn't want to discuss. They rested for a few more minutes, then continued. The terrain grew steeper. Coda never complained about Eliza's slow pace, never showed impatience. He simply adjusted his speed to match hers, moving at a rhythm that was almost meditative. Around midday, they stopped again in a sheltered spot where the sun had melted patches of snow, revealing brown grass beneath. "Eat." Coda handed her more dried meat. While she ate, he disappeared into the trees. Eliza sat in the sunlight, feeling warmth on her face, listening to the silence. It was so different from the mining camp, where there was always noise, hammers on rock, men shouting, wagons creaking, the stamp mill pounding ore to dust. Here, there was just wind and birdsong, and the whisper of snow sliding from branches. Coda returned carrying several thin branches and some kind of dried plant material. He sat beside her and began working with the plants, stripping leaves and crushing them between his hands. "What is that?" Eliza asked. "Willow bark. For pain." He handed her a few pieces. "Chew it. Don't swallow." The bark was bitter and made her mouth feel strange, but after a few minutes, the throbbing in her knee began to ease. "Better?" Coda asked. "Yes. Thank you." He nodded and stood. Another hour. Then we're there. That last hour was the hardest. The terrain grew rockier, the path less clear. Eliza's injured knee was on fire despite the willow bark, Twice she stumbled and nearly fell. Both times Koda was there, his hand steady on her arm. "Almost there," he said quietly. "Keep going." And then, suddenly, they emerged into a small clearing. Eliza stopped, staring. The lodge was unlike anything she'd expected. It wasn't a crude shelter or a simple cabin. It was a solid structure built against the side of a massive rock outcrop, its walls made of stacked stone and timber, its roof covered with bark and hides. Smoke rose from a hole in the center of the roof. A small stream ran nearby, its water dark against snow. But what struck her most was how the lodge seemed to belong here, as if it had grown from the mountain itself rather than being built upon it. "Home," Koda said simply. He led her to the entrance, a low doorway covered by a heavy hide. He pushed it aside and gestured for her to enter. Eliza ducked inside and found herself in a single large room, warm and dim and smelling of wood smoke and sage. A fire burned in a central pit, its smoke rising through the roof hole. Around the edges of the room were sleeping platforms covered with furs, storage baskets, and tools hanging from wooden pegs. Herbs hung drying from the rafters. It was sparse but well organized, clean, orderly. Everything had its place. "Sit," Koda pointed to a platform near the fire. Eliza lowered herself onto the furs, relief flooding through her. They'd made it. She was safe. Koda busied himself around the lodge, building up the fire, pulling out supplies. He heated water in a clay pot and made some kind of tea from dried leaves. He brought it to her in a wooden cup. "Drink. It will help with the pain and the cold." The tea was bitter but warming. Eliza sipped it slowly, watching Koda work. His movements were economical, practiced. This was a man completely at ease in his environment. "Why do you live up here alone?" she asked finally. Koda was quiet for a long moment, feeding sticks to the fire. "Sometimes alone is safer than among people." "Safer from what?" "From those who would make you someone you're not." Eliza thought about that, about Frank trying to make her obedient, about McCready trying to make her property, about the whole camp trying to make her invisible. "I understand," she said softly. Koda glanced at her and something in his expression shifted. A recognition, perhaps. A kinship. "I think you do." He prepared more food, this time a stew made from dried meat and roots, cooked in the clay pot until the lodge filled with rich aroma. When it was ready, he served it in wooden bowls, and they ate in companionable silence. After the meal, Koda examined Eliza's knee more carefully, testing the swelling, checking for broken bones. His touch was impersonal but gentle. "Not broken," he announced. "Badly twisted. It will heal, but you need to rest it for several days, maybe a week." "A week?" Alarm flashed through her. "I can't stay here that long. I'm already imposing." "You'll stay until you're healed enough to make your own choice about where to go." "But no arguments." His tone was firm. "The mountain already tried to kill you once. I won't let you go out there until you're ready." Eliza wanted to protest, but exhaustion was pulling at her like a tide. The warmth, the food, the tea, it was all catching up with her. Her eyelids grew heavy. "Sleep," Koda said. "You're safe here." "How can you be sure?" "Because I give you my word. And I don't give it lightly." Eliza believed him. She didn't know why, but she did. She lay down on the furs, and within moments, consciousness slipped away. The days that followed fell into a rhythm that was both strange and comforting. Eliza would wake to find Koda already up, tending the fire or preparing food. They would eat together in the morning light filtering through the smoke hole. Then Koda would leave to check his trap lines or hunt, and Eliza would be alone in the lodge. At first the solitude unnerved her. She'd never been truly alone before. There had always been the noise of the mining camp, the presence of other people. But gradually she began to understand the difference between being alone and being lonely. Here, in the silence of the mountains, she could hear herself think. She spent those hours exploring the lodge, examining the tools and baskets, the dried herbs and animal hides. Everything told a story of self-sufficiency, of skill passed down through generations. One day she found a small wooden box tucked in a corner. Inside were carefully folded pieces of fabric, clothing that had belonged to a woman, a beaded leather dress, moccasins, a woven belt. When Koda returned that evening, she asked about them. He was quiet for a long moment, his hands still on the rabbit he was skinning. "My wife's," he said finally. "She died 3 winters ago. Fever." "I'm sorry." He nodded, but didn't elaborate. Eliza understood. Some grief was too heavy for words. "I can wear these?" she asked, gesturing to her own torn, stained clothes. "Mine are falling apart." She would want them used. "Take them." That night, Eliza changed into the leather dress. It fit reasonably well. The woman had been close to her size. The leather was soft from years of wear, decorated with intricate beadwork and patterns she didn't recognize. When she emerged, Coda looked up from the fire and something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe. Or memory. But he only said, "It suits you." As the days passed, Coda began teaching her, not with formal lessons, but through demonstration and practice. He showed her how to maintain the fire, how to bank it at night so it wouldn't die, how to read smoke to judge the weather, how to recognize different bird calls and what they meant. "That sound?" He tilted his head, listening to a distant whistle. "Clark's nutcracker. It means the snow is melting higher up. Spring is coming." He taught her which plants were safe to eat and which would kill her, how to find water by watching animal trails, how to move quietly through the forest without disturbing it. "Don't fight the mountain," he said. "Move with it. Be part of it." Eliza absorbed everything like someone dying of thirst. This knowledge was power, the power to survive, to be independent, to never again need someone like Frank or McCready. Her knee healed slowly. Each day she could walk a little farther, put a little more weight on it. Coda made her exercise it carefully, building back the strength. One afternoon, perhaps 10 days after her arrival, she was practicing walking without the stick when her hand went to her throat and found the locket there. She'd almost forgotten about it. Coda noticed the gesture. "What is that?" "My mother's locket. The only thing I have from her." "May I see?" Eliza hesitated, then unclasped it and handed it over. Coda examined it carefully, turning it in the firelight. Then his eyes sharpened. "Open it." "I tried. The clasp is stuck." He produced a small knife and worked at the edge of the locket with infinite patience. After a few minutes, it popped open. Inside was a coiled strand of red thread, faded with age, and a tiny piece of paper with words written in a language Eliza didn't recognize. Coda stared at it, his expression unreadable. "What is it?" Eliza asked. "This thread." He touched it carefully. "This is made from madder root dye, the old way. And these words, they're Apache, old Apache." "What do they say?" Coda was quiet, his brow furrowed. "It says, 'She who walks 2 paths will find her home in the mountains.'" Eliza's breath caught. "My mother never told me. I don't understand." "Your mother," Coda said slowly. "What was her name before she married?" "I don't know. She never spoke about her life before she came west. She said the past didn't matter." Coda handed the locket back, but his eyes were distant, thinking. "Some of our people left the old ways, went to schools, married white men, tried to forget." He looked at her directly. "But the blood remembers, even when the mind forgets." Eliza's hand closed around the locket. "Are you saying my mother was Apache?" "Maybe. Or maybe she had family who were. The thread, the words, these are not random things. Someone wanted you to know." The revelation shifted something in Eliza's understanding of herself. She'd always assumed she was just another poor white girl from the East, displaced and forgotten. But this suggested something more complex, a heritage she'd never known existed. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It means you're not as lost as you thought. It means you're standing on the path your mother hoped you'd find." That night, Eliza lay awake long after Coda had gone to sleep on the other side of the fire. She held the locket, feeling the weight of it differently now. Not just a keepsake, a message, a promise. She who walks 2 paths will find her home in the mountains. She was white and Apache, civilized and wild, lost and found. And for the first time in her life, the contradictions didn't feel like a problem. They felt like a beginning. Bas. 3 weeks after her arrival, Eliza woke before dawn to the sound of horses in the distance. She sat up sharply, her heart pounding. Coda was already awake, standing by the entrance, listening. "How many?" she whispered. "3, maybe 4. His expression was grim. "They're searching the ridge. They found us." "Not yet, but they're closer than they should be." Fear coiled in Eliza's stomach. "What do we do?" Coda moved to his weapons, checking his rifle, his knife. "You stay here. Stay quiet. I'll handle this. You can't go out there alone." "I'm not alone." Before Eliza could ask what he meant, Coda stepped outside. She moved to the entrance and peered through a gap in the hide covering. The sun was just rising, painting the snow gold and pink. Coda stood in the clearing, utterly still, watching the tree line. Then Eliza saw them, riders emerging from the forest. 4 men on horseback, their breath and the horse's breath creating clouds in the cold air. Frank was in the lead. Beside him, Bull McCready. 2 other miners she recognized from the camp. Her stepfather's eyes locked onto Coda, and his face twisted with anger. "You!" Frank shouted. "Where is she? Where's the girl?" Coda didn't move, didn't speak. "We know she's here," McCready snarled. "We tracked her this far. You got no right to keep her. She belongs to us." "No one belongs to anyone," Coda said quietly. "That's where you're wrong, Indian." Frank's hand moved to the rifle on his saddle. "That girl's my property. Her mother married me, which makes her mine to do with as I please. Now bring her out before this gets ugly." Coda remained absolutely still. Eliza could see the calculation in his eyes, the assessment of odds and angles. 4 armed men, one of him. But then something moved in the trees behind the riders. A shadow. Then another. The horses sensed it first, their ears flicking back, hooves shifting nervously. McCready twisted in his saddle. "What the?" Men emerged from the forest. Apache men, perhaps a dozen of them, appearing as silently as ghosts. They carried rifles, bows, spears. They formed a loose circle around the mounted men, cutting off retreat. Frank's face went pale. "Now hold on. We don't want trouble." An older man stepped forward, tall, weathered, with gray-braided hair and eyes sharp as flint. He spoke to Coda in Apache, a rapid exchange Eliza couldn't follow. Coda replied, just gestured toward the lodge, explained something. The elder nodded and turned to Frank. When he spoke, his English was accented but clear. "You have come into the mountain's heart. This is not your place. You are not welcome here." "We just want the girl," Frank said, his voice cracking. "Give us the girl and we'll go." "The girl chose to leave you. Her choice is her own." "She's mine!" Frank's courage was returning with his anger. "She's got no right to run off. I got a legal claim." "Your law means nothing here." McCready tried a different approach. "Look, we can pay. Silver, gold, whatever you want, just give her back." The elder's expression didn't change. "You cannot buy what is not for sale." "Then we'll take her by force." McCready's hand moved toward his gun. Every Apache warrior raised their weapons simultaneously. The click of hammers and creak of bowstrings filled the air. Frank and his men froze. The elder spoke again, his voice calm but carrying absolute authority. "If you reach for those weapons, you will not leave this mountain, not on your horses, not in one piece. Choose wisely." The silence stretched. Eliza watched through the gap, her hands pressed to her mouth. Finally, Frank's shoulders sagged. "You can't do this. There's laws." "Not here. The army will not come into these mountains for one girl, and if they do, they will not find you or her. They will find only rock and snow and silence." It was over. Eliza could see it in Frank's eyes, the moment he realized he'd lost, that she was beyond his reach forever. McCready spat into the snow. "Keep her then. Worthless girl probably wasn't worth the trouble anyway." "Go now," the elder said, "and do not return." The riders turned their horses. The Apache warriors parted, creating a corridor back toward the lower slopes. Frank looked back once toward the lodge, his face twisted with impotent rage, and then they were gone, vanishing into the forest. The warriors waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Then they lowered their weapons. The elder approached Coda, and they spoke again in Apache. At one point, the elder glanced toward the lodge. his eyes finding Eliza through the gap. He called out something in Apache. Coda turned. "He wants to meet you. Come out." Eliza's hands were shaking, but she pushed aside the hide and stepped into the clearing. The elder studied her with eyes that seemed to see everything: her fear, her relief, her confusion. He said something to Coda, who translated. "He says you're wearing Wintermoon's dress, Coda's wife. He asks if you honor the woman who wore it before you." "I do," Eliza said. "I honor her memory, and I'm grateful for her clothes," Coda translated. The elder nodded slowly. Then he spoke directly to Eliza in English, his hand moving to the locket visible at her throat. "You wear the old signs. You carry the thread of the people. Coda says you choose freedom over comfort. Is this true?" "Yes." "You would stay in the mountains, learn the ways?" Eliza looked at Coda, then back at the elder. In that moment, she understood that this was a threshold, a point of no return. She could ask to be taken to a town, find work as a laundress or cook, disappear into civilization, or she could stay, learn, become something she'd never imagined. "I would stay," she said. "If I'm welcome." The elder and Coda exchanged a long look. Then the elder smiled, just slightly. "You are welcome, daughter. We will teach you. You will teach us what you know of the world below. This is how we survive. This is how we remain strong." He turned and spoke to the assembled warriors. Several of them nodded. Then, as silently as they'd appeared, they began to melt back into the forest. The elder paused before leaving, placing his hand on Coda's shoulder and speaking quietly. Coda listened, then nodded. When they were alone again, Eliza looked at Coda. "What did he say?" "He said the mountain brought you here for a reason, that your mother's blood knew the way home, even if she'd forgotten." Coda's expression was serious. "He said I should teach you not just to survive, but to belong. Can you do that?" "I can try." They stood in the clearing as the sun climbed higher, warming the air, melting the frost on the trees. Somewhere a raven called. The stream gurgled over stones. Eliza felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she'd carried so long she'd stopped noticing it. The fear that someone would come for her, the belief that she'd never truly be free. For the first time since her mother's death, she could breathe. "Thank you," she said quietly. Coda shook his head. "Don't thank me yet. The learning has just begun, and it won't be easy. I'm not afraid of hard work." "Good. Because spring is coming, and there's much to do." He turned back toward the lodge, and Eliza followed. As she ducked through the entrance into the warm interior, she touched her mother's locket. "She who walks 2 paths will find her home in the mountains." She was home. Spring arrived in the mountains like a whisper that gradually became a song. The snow began its slow retreat, revealing brown earth and the first brave shoots of green pushing through the soil. Ice on the stream cracked and melted, transforming still silence into rushing music. Birds returned from wherever they'd wintered, filling the dawn with calls that Eliza was learning to identify. The raven's croak, the meadowlark's trill, the sharp cry of the red-tailed hawk circling overhead. Coda had been right. The learning was not easy. Each morning began before sunrise. Coda would wake her by stirring the fire, the sound of wood settling against coals pulling her from sleep. They would eat in the gray pre-dawn light, usually dried meat softened in hot water, sometimes fresh rabbit or grouse if Coda had hunted the day before, always accompanied by the bitter tea made from herbs Eliza was beginning to recognize by scent alone. Then the work would begin. "Today you learn to read tracks," Coda announced one morning, handing her a piece of hardtack. "Finish eating. We leave when the sun touches that peak." He pointed to a distant mountain, its summit still white with snow. Eliza ate quickly, her fingers clumsy with cold despite the fire's warmth. Her knee had healed well enough for walking, though it still ached when the weather changed. She'd learned to ignore the discomfort. They left the lodge and descended into a valley where the snow had melted in patches, exposing muddy ground. Coda knelt beside the first print they encountered, a delicate impression in the soft earth. "Deer," he said. "See how the hooves are narrow, pointed, 2 toes. This one passed through early this morning. The edges are still sharp." Eliza crouched beside him, studying the print. "How do you know it was this morning?" "Feel the mud." He pressed his finger into the earth beside the track. Still cold, still damp. If it was yesterday, the sun would have dried the surface. And see here? He pointed to a pebble that had been displaced by the deer's step. Still wet underneath, very fresh. They followed the trail for an hour, Coda pointing out details Eliza would never have noticed on her own. Where the deer had paused to feed, browsing on new willow shoots. Where it had startled and bounded away, the prints deeper and farther apart. Where it had crossed the stream, water still dripping from stones. Everything tells a story, Coda said. You just have to learn the language. By midday, Eliza's head was spinning with information. She'd learned to identify tracks from deer, elk, rabbit, coyote, and bear. She'd learned that fresh scat meant an animal was close, that broken branches at a certain height meant elk had been browsing, that circular depressions in the grass meant deer had bedded down for the night. Why does all this matter? She asked as they rested beside a small waterfall. We have food. We have shelter. Coda handed her the water skin. Today we have food. Tomorrow? Next week? What if I'm injured and can't hunt? What if the snows come early and trap us for months? You need to know how to feed yourself, how to read the mountain so it feeds you. Teach me to hunt then. Not yet. First you learn to see, to understand. Hunting comes after. It was frustrating, this patient building of knowledge. Eliza wanted to skip ahead, to master everything at once. But Coda refused to be rushed. A tree doesn't grow from seed to full height in one season, he said when she complained. It grows slowly, ring by ring, strong enough to withstand storms. You're building the rings that will keep you alive when the storms come. So she learned patience. She learned to observe. The next day he taught her about plants. They walked for miles, Coda stopping every few yards to point out something new. Wild onion growing in damp soil near the stream. The young leaves of dandelion, bitter but nutritious. Cattails whose roots could be roasted and eaten. Serviceberry bushes that would bear fruit in summer. This one, he said, kneeling beside a cluster of small white flowers, is yampa. The root is good, tastes like potato. You dig it in late summer, but this one... He moved to a similar-looking plant a few feet away. This is water hemlock. It will kill you in an hour. Painful death. Convulsions. No cure. Eliza stared at the two plants, trying to memorize the subtle differences in leaf shape, in the way the stems attached, in the smell when Coda crushed a leaf between his fingers. How do you remember all this? My grandfather taught me. His grandfather taught him. The knowledge goes back to the first people who walked these mountains. They learned by trying, by watching, by dying sometimes. We inherit their wisdom. And you're passing it to me. Yes, because wisdom that isn't shared dies with the person who holds it. This way, it lives. They returned to the lodge at dusk, Eliza's head full of plant names and warnings, her hands carrying samples Coda had her collect. That evening, he showed her how to prepare some of the roots they'd dug, scraping, washing, roasting in the coals until they were tender and sweet. The food they produced together tasted different than the meals Coda prepared alone. Better, somehow. Earned. As the days lengthened, Coda's lessons expanded. He taught her how to make cordage from plant fibers, twisting them into strong rope that could be used for snares or shelter building. How to chip stone into cutting tools, the right angle of strike, the way to read the grain in the rock. How to preserve meat by cutting it thin and drying it over smoke, rubbing it with salt he collected from a mineral lick a day's walk from the lodge. Nothing is wasted, he said as they worked hides from rabbits he'd trapped. Meat for food, hide for clothing, sinew for thread, bones for tools, even the skull. See how it makes a good scoop for the fire? Eliza learned to scrape the hides clean, to soften them by working in a paste made from the animal's own brain, to smoke them until they were supple and waterproof. Her hands grew rough and capable. The soft skin of her former life disappeared, replaced by calluses and small scars. She changed in other ways, too. The constant work and mountain air made her stronger. She could walk for hours without tiring, could carry loads that would have crushed her a month ago. Her senses sharpened. She began to hear the subtle sounds Coda heard, to notice the small signs he pointed out. One morning, she woke to find Coda already outside, his attention focused on something in the trees. She joined him, following his gaze. What is it? Listen. Eliza closed her eyes and listened. At first, she heard only the usual morning chorus, birds, wind, the stream. Then she caught it. A sound that didn't belong. A rhythmic cracking, like wood being struck against wood. Magpies, she said, opening her eyes. They're scolding something. Coda smiled. It was a rare expression on his usually serious face. Good. What are they scolding? I don't know. Another bird? Listen to the pattern. Short bursts, moving along the ridge. Eliza concentrated. The scolding calls were indeed moving, tracking something through the forest. Not random, following. Something on the ground, she said. Something moving. Yes. What? She thought about what Coda had taught her. Different animals provoked different responses. Too persistent for a deer. They wouldn't care. Not a bear. They'd be more agitated. A person? Maybe. Or a coyote hunting. The magpies follow predators hoping to steal from their kill. He was testing her constantly now, turning every moment into a lesson. It was exhausting and exhilarating. That afternoon, Coda took her to a meadow where the grass was just beginning to green. He handed her a long stick with a fire-hardened point. Dig there. He indicated a spot where the ground looked slightly disturbed. Eliza drove the stick into the earth and pried up the soil. A few inches down, she found a cluster of bulbs. Wild onions, their papery skins protecting the white flesh beneath. Good, Coda said. Now find 3 more patches without my help. She wandered the meadow, studying the ground. At first everything looked the same, just grass and earth and rocks. But gradually patterns emerged, slight differences in color, the way certain areas held moisture, the type of plants that grew nearby. She found 2 more patches of onions, then something else, yampa, recognizable by its delicate white flowers. By the time the sun began to set, she had collected enough to supplement their evening meal. You're learning to see, Coda said as they walked back to the lodge. Not just with your eyes, with your mind, your instincts. I'm starting to understand why you live up here, Eliza said. Down in the camp, everything felt random, chaotic. But here, everything has order, purpose. The mountain has its own logic. Once you learn it, you can work with it instead of against it. That night, after they'd eaten and the fire had burned down to coals, Coda spoke more than usual. My wife, Winter Moon, she was like you in some ways. She came from the settlements. Not white, but not raised in the old ways either. Her mother had been sent to a mission school as a girl, taught to be ashamed of her blood. When Winter Moon was young, she ran away from the school and found her way back to the people. How did you meet her? She was sick, fever, starving. I found her on the lower slopes, brought her here, nursed her back to health. His voice grew quiet. She decided to stay, learned everything she could, became one of the strongest women I knew. You must miss her terribly. Every day. But she taught me something important before she died. She said the mountain gives what it gives and takes what it takes. Fighting that truth only brings more pain. Better to accept, to honor what was by continuing to live well. Eliza thought about her own mother, who died coughing blood into rags while Frank counted his drinking money. Margaret Carter had never accepted her fate. She'd fought it until the end, bitter and exhausted. Do you think my mother knew, Eliza asked, about her Apache blood? About what it meant? I think she knew enough to give you that locket, enough to put that message inside. Maybe she couldn't live the old ways herself, but she wanted you to have the choice she never had. Eliza pulled the locket from beneath her dress and opened it, studying the red thread coiled inside. In the firelight, it seemed almost alive, glowing like an ember. The elder, she said. What's his name? Stands tall. He's the oldest of our band, carries the stories, the medicines, the sacred knowledge. When he recognized the thread in your locket, it meant something. These threads are given to daughters, passed down through generations. Your mother must have received it from her mother, who received it from hers. So I'm part of an unbroken line. Yes, a line that goes back to the beginning, and now you're learning to honor it. The fire crackled. Outside, an owl called from the darkness. Coda, Eliza said quietly, why are you really helping me? You could have left me on that mountain. Could have saved yourself the trouble. He was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then he spoke, his voice rough with emotion he usually kept hidden. Because someone helped me once. When I was young and foolish and thought I could live between two worlds, the white world and the Apache world. I tried to work for a ranch down in the valley, thought I could make money, buy things, live like they did. But his jaw tightened. They treated me like an animal, worked me until I collapsed, paid me half what they paid white workers, beat me when I complained. When I finally left, they hunted me, said I'd stolen from them. Lies. But their truth meant more than mine. How did you escape? Stan's Tall found me, wounded, half dead. He brought me back to the people, healed me, taught me that trying to be something you're not only kills you slowly. He said, be Apache, be proud, be complete. That's the only way to survive. Coda looked at her across the fire. You reminded me of myself, running from people who wanted to own you, trying to survive in a world that saw you as less than human. I couldn't leave you any more than Stan's Tall could leave me. Eliza felt tears sting her eyes. Thank you for telling me. We all carry scars. Some show, some don't. The important thing is not letting them define us. They sat in comfortable silence until the fire died to ash, and the cold drove them to their sleeping furs. The weeks passed in a rhythm of work and learning. Coda took Eliza farther from the lodge each day, expanding her understanding of the mountain's geography. He showed her where to find flint for making tools, where the best clay for pottery could be dug, where medicinal plants grew in abundance. One afternoon, they hiked to a high ridge where the view stretched for miles in every direction. Eliza could see the valley far below, the mining camp just visible as a smudge of smoke against the green. That was my whole world, she said, staring down at it. It looks so small from up here. Most prisons do, once you're free of them. Do you ever go down there? To the settlements? Sometimes, to trade. I have furs and herbs they want, and they have things I need, metal for knives, salt, needles. But I don't stay longer than necessary. Their air feels wrong. Too many people, too much noise, too much wanting things that don't matter. I used to think I wanted their life, a real house, store-bought dresses, security. And now? Eliza looked around at the vast wilderness, the mountains rolling away to the horizon, the sky so blue it hurt to look at. Now I think security is an illusion. The only real safety comes from knowing how to take care of yourself. You're learning fast. They descended the ridge and returned to the lodge as the sun began to set. That evening, Coda announced it was time to teach her to hunt. We'll start small, he said. Rabbit. They're plentiful and not too difficult. We'll use snares first. Bow and arrow later. He showed her how to identify rabbit runs, the trails they used repeatedly between feeding areas and cover. How to set a snare at exactly the right height, disguised with grass and positioned where the rabbit would step into it without suspecting danger. The snare does the work while you sleep, Coda said, but you have to check them every day. An animal caught in a snare suffers if left too long. That's cruel and disrespectful. We kill for food, not for entertainment. We honor what we take. They set 6 snares in different locations, then returned to the lodge. The next morning, 2 had been triggered. One was empty. The rabbit had escaped. But the other held a fat cottontail, already dead, caught cleanly around the neck. Coda showed Eliza how to skin and gut the animal, how to save the hide for tanning, the sinew for thread, even the feet for good luck charms. Nothing is wasted, he repeated. The rabbit gave its life to feed us. We honor that gift by using everything. They roasted the meat that evening, and it tasted sweeter than any meal Eliza could remember from her old life. This wasn't food bought with money or served by someone else's labor. This was food she'd helped procure, prepare, and cook. She'd earned every bite. As spring deepened into early summer, the mountain transformed. Wildflowers carpeted the meadows. Lupine, columbine, Indian paintbrush in brilliant reds and blues and purples. The serviceberry bushes bloomed white, promising fruit later in the season. Bears emerged from hibernation, visible as dark shapes on distant slopes. Coda took Eliza to a place he called the Gathering Rock, where several streams converged to form a small waterfall. Other Apache people were there, families, elders, children, perhaps 30 people in all. Eliza's heart raced as she approached. These were Coda's people, her people, if the locket and her mother's blood meant what Stans Tall had suggested. Stans Tall himself was there, sitting in the shade of a large pine. When he saw them approaching, he rose and walked to meet them. He spoke to Coda in Apache, then turned to Eliza and addressed her in English. You have survived the winter and learned the spring lessons. Coda says you work hard and ask good questions. This is how we know someone is serious about learning. I want to learn everything, Eliza said. Everything is too much for one lifetime, but you can learn what matters. He gestured toward the gathered people. Come, meet your relatives. The word struck Eliza like a physical blow. Relatives, family. Stans Tall introduced her to the others. There was Gray Owl Woman, ancient and weathered, who remembered when buffalo still roamed these mountains. Swift Runner, a young man about Eliza's age, who grinned shyly when they were introduced. Singing Waters, a woman perhaps 30 years old with twin daughters who stared at Eliza with open curiosity. And there was Morning Light, a woman about 40 with streaks of gray in her black hair and eyes that seemed to look straight through to Eliza's soul. When Stans Tall spoke to her in Apache, gesturing to Eliza's locket, Morning Light's expression changed from neutral to shocked. She stepped forward and said something urgent in Apache. Stans Tall replied calmly, then turned to Eliza. Morning Light was your mother's cousin. Your grandmother was her mother's sister. She recognizes the locket. It belonged to your grandmother, Red Thread Woman. Eliza's knees went weak. My mother's cousin? You're my family? Morning Light spoke rapidly in Apache, her hands moving expressively. Stans Tall translated. She says your mother was taken to a mission school when she was 8 years old. Her name was Quiet Deer. The school changed her name to Margaret. They cut her hair, forbade her to speak Apache, beat her when she practiced the old ways. When she was 16, she ran away, but by then she'd forgotten most of her language. She was lost between two worlds. She tried to find her way back to the people, but was ashamed of how much she'd lost. Eventually, she went east, married your father, a good man, Morning Light says, and tried to live in the white world. When your father died and she married Frank Carter, Morning Light lost track of her. She didn't know Margaret had died, didn't know about you. Tears streamed down Eliza's face. All those years, her mother had carried this secret, this pain, had tried to protect Eliza by hiding her heritage, not realizing she was also hiding the key to her daughter's salvation. Morning Light stepped forward and wrapped Eliza in a fierce embrace. She spoke softly in Apache, words Eliza couldn't understand but whose meaning was clear. Welcome. Forgiveness. Love. When they separated, Morning Light held Eliza at arm's length and studied her face. Then she smiled and spoke in halting English. You have her eyes. Quiet Deer's eyes. Welcome home, daughter of my cousin. Welcome home. The gathering lasted 3 days. During that time, Eliza was folded into the community like she'd always belonged. The children taught her Apache words for common things: water, fire, sky, bird, rabbit. The women showed her how they prepared certain foods, how they sewed moccasins with intricate beadwork, how they wove baskets from willow shoots. Gray Owl Woman pulled Eliza aside on the second day and spoke to her through Stans Tall's translation. Your grandmother, Red Thread Woman, was a healer. She knew plants, songs, prayers. The gift often passes to daughters and granddaughters. I knew her well. If you wish, I will teach you what she would have taught you. Yes, Eliza said immediately. Please. Gray Owl Woman nodded with satisfaction. Good. But you must be patient. This knowledge takes years to master. We'll start with the basics. That afternoon, Gray Owl Woman took Eliza into the forest and began teaching her about medicinal plants. Not just their names and uses, but the proper way to harvest them. With respect, with prayers, taking only what was needed and leaving enough for the plants to regenerate. We don't just take, Gray Owl Woman said through Stans Tall's translation. We give back. We leave offerings. We sing to the plants, thanking them. This keeps the balance. Without balance, the mountain dies and we die with it. Eliza absorbed every word, every gesture, every prayer. This was the knowledge her mother had lost, the wisdom that should have been passed to her but wasn't. She was reclaiming it now, building a bridge across the gap the mission school had created. On the third evening, the community gathered around a large fire. Stans Tall stood and spoke in Apache, his voice carrying across the gathering. Coda, sitting beside Eliza, translated quietly. He says the mountain has returned what was lost, that Quiet Deer's daughter has found her way home, guided by the red thread that connects all of us to our ancestors. He says this is a sign that the old ways are not dead, that our blood remembers even when our minds forget. Stands Tall gestured to Eliza, saying something that made several people nod in agreement. He's giving you a name, Coda translated. Tala. It means the fire that returns. He says you are like a flame that was blown out but has been rekindled. You carry the light of your grandmother, your mother, all the women who came before you. Tala. The name settled over Eliza like a warm blanket. Not the name Frank had used with contempt. Not the name the mining camp had ignored. A new name for a new life. Morning light approached and placed something in Eliza's hands, a beaded belt made with intricate patterns in red and white. She spoke in Apache, and Coda translated. This belonged to your grandmother. Morning light has kept it safe, waiting for someone to give it to. She wants you to have it. Eliza ran her fingers over the beadwork, each tiny bead placed with such care, such skill. Her grandmother's hands had made this. Her grandmother, who she'd never known existed until 3 days ago. Tell her thank you, Eliza said. Tell her I'll honor this gift and the woman who made it. The celebration continued late into the night. There was singing, drumming, stories told in Apache that Coda translated in whispers. Children fell asleep against their mother's shoulders. The fire burned bright against the darkness. When it was finally time to return to the lodge, Eliza felt different. Not just welcomed, not just accepted, claimed. She belonged to something larger than herself, something that stretched back through generations and would continue forward long after she was gone. How do you feel? Coda asked as they walked through the moonlit forest. Like I've been asleep my whole life and just woke up. Good. That's good. They walked in comfortable silence until Coda spoke again. Stands Tall asked me something tonight. He asked if I was planning to ask you to stay permanently. To make this arrangement more than temporary. Eliza's heart skipped. What did you tell him? I told him that decision is yours to make. You're free to go whenever you wish, free to stay if that's what you want. I won't hold you here. And if I want to stay? Coda stopped walking and turned to face her. In the moonlight, his features were shadowed, unreadable. Then you stay. We continue as we have been. I teach you, you learn. We share the work, the food, the lodge. But Eliza, Tala, you need to understand something. If you stay, you're choosing this life completely. The mountain is beautiful, but it's also harsh. Winters are brutal. Food can be scarce. There's danger from animals, from weather, from men who don't respect boundaries. It's not an easy life. I never wanted easy, Tala said. I wanted free. I wanted mine. This is the first place I've ever felt like I could breathe. Then breathe, Coda said simply, and stay as long as you need to. They returned to the lodge as the first gray light of dawn touched the eastern sky. Tala lay down on her sleeping furs but didn't immediately close her eyes. Instead, she stared up at the smoke hole, watching the stars fade as morning came. She thought about Frank, probably drunk in the mining camp, telling anyone who'd listen about the ungrateful girl who'd run away. She thought about McCready, angry about losing his prize. She thought about the women in the camp who'd clucked their tongues and said she'd come to a bad end. Let them think what they wanted. She was Tala now, fire that returns, granddaughter of Red Thread Woman, cousin to Morning Light, student of Coda and Gray Owl Woman, part of something ancient and enduring. She was home, and she was never leaving. Summer arrived with a heat that transformed the mountain into a place of abundance and relentless work. The days stretched long and golden, the sun rising before Tala woke and setting long after she'd completed her evening tasks. The work never stopped. There was always something to gather, preserve, prepare for the lean months ahead. But Tala threw herself into it with an energy that surprised even Coda. She was no longer the frightened girl who'd stumbled into his shelter half-frozen and desperate. Her hands were strong now, capable. Her body had hardened from constant physical labor, carrying water, gathering wood, hiking miles each day in search of plants and game. Her skin had bronzed from the sun, and the beaded dress morning light had given her fit comfortably over muscles she'd never possessed in her old life. But the greatest change was internal. Tala moved through the world differently now, with a confidence that came from competence. She knew how to feed herself, shelter herself, protect herself. She was no longer dependent on anyone's mercy or goodwill. One morning, Gray Owl Woman arrived at the lodge before sunrise, moving silently despite her age. Tala woke to find the old woman sitting by the fire, preparing tea from herbs she'd brought in a leather pouch. "Today you learn the sacred plants," Gray Owl Woman said in her halting English. She gestured for Tala to sit. "Not food plants, not simple medicine. The plants that carry spirit, the ones that heal what cannot be seen." Koda had already left to check his trap lines. Gray Owl Woman handed Tala a cup of the steaming tea and watched as she drank it. The taste was complex, bitter and sweet at once, with an undertone of something Tala couldn't identify. "Your grandmother knew these plants better than anyone," Gray Owl Woman continued. "She could cure fevers that killed others, could ease pain that made strong men cry, could help women whose babies wouldn't come. The spirits spoke to her through the plants, told her what they needed." "Do the spirits speak to you?" Tala asked. Gray Owl Woman's eyes crinkled with something that might have been amusement. "Sometimes, when I'm quiet enough to listen. Most people talk too much inside their heads. Can't hear anything else." They left the lodge as the sun broke over the eastern peaks, painting the sky in shades of coral and gold. Gray Owl Woman led Tala to places she'd never been before. Hidden groves where certain plants grew in the deep shade, rocky slopes where medicinal roots pushed through thin soil, meadows where flowers bloomed that existed nowhere else on the mountain. At each location, Gray Owl Woman would stop and speak to the plants before harvesting anything, sometimes in Apache, sometimes in a language that sounded older, stranger. She would leave offerings, a pinch of cornmeal, a strand of hair, a small stone painted with ochre. "You don't just take," she explained. "You ask permission. You give thanks. You maintain the relationship. Plants are not things. They are alive, aware. They choose whether to help us or not." Tala watched and learned. Gray Owl Woman showed her how to identify osha root, which could treat respiratory illness, how to prepare yarrow for stopping bleeding, how to recognize the subtle differences between plants that healed and those that harmed. "This one," Gray Owl Woman said, kneeling beside a cluster of delicate purple flowers, "helps women whose monthly bleeding is too painful. You make tea from the leaves, drink it 3 days before the bleeding starts. But too much will make you sick. Everything is balance. Too little, no effect. Too much, poison." They worked until the sun was high overhead, filling baskets with carefully selected plants. Then Gray Owl Woman led Tala to a secluded spot where a spring bubbled from the rocks, forming a small pool surrounded by ferns. "We rest here, eat." They shared dried meat and wild strawberries Gray Owl Woman had gathered along the way. The old woman was quiet for a long time, chewing slowly, watching the water ripple in the pool. Finally, she spoke. "Your grandmother came to me when she was about your age. Her mother had died, and the knowledge was passing to her. She was afraid. Didn't think she was worthy of such responsibility." "What did you tell her?" "I told her the spirits don't choose people who think they're worthy. They choose people who are willing to learn, to serve, to carry the burden of knowing. Worthiness comes from doing the work, not from believing you deserve it." Tala absorbed this. "Do you think I can learn what she knew?" "No." Gray Owl Woman's bluntness was startling. "She spent 50 years mastering this knowledge. You have maybe 30 years if you're lucky, and the mountain doesn't kill you first. But you can learn enough to help people. Enough to honor her memory. Enough to pass something to the next generation." It was both disappointing and liberating. Tala didn't have to become her grandmother. She only had to become herself, carrying forward what she could. They returned to the lodge as evening approached. Koda was there, preparing a deer he'd killed that morning. He looked up as they entered, his eyes moving between Tala and Gray Owl Woman. "She did well," he asked the old woman in Apache. Gray Owl Woman replied at length. Koda listened, then nodded. After Gray Owl Woman left, Tala helped Koda process the deer. They worked in comfortable silence, the way they'd learned to do over the past months. Tala no longer needed constant instruction. She knew how to make the cuts, where to find the choice meat. how to save the organs that could be eaten or used for other purposes. "What did Gray Owl Woman say about me?" Tala asked as she worked. "She said you have the gift, that the plants respond to you the way they responded to your grandmother. She said she'll continue teaching you as long as you're willing to learn." "I'm willing." "I know. But Tala, you need to understand something. If you become a healer, people will depend on you. They'll come to you when they're sick, when they're dying, when their children are suffering. You'll have to make choices about who to help and how. You'll see things you wish you could forget. It's not just gathering pretty plants and making tea." Tala set down her knife and looked at him directly. "I watched my mother die coughing blood while Frank counted his drinking money and did nothing. I watched women in the mining camp lose babies because there was no one who knew how to help them. I'm not afraid of sickness or death, Coda. I'm afraid of being useless when someone needs help." His expression softened. "Then you'll make a good healer." The summer days fell into a new pattern. Mornings with Gray Owl Woman, learning plants and preparations. Afternoons helping Coda with the endless work of survival, hunting, gathering, preserving food for winter. Evenings around the fire, sometimes alone, sometimes visited by others from the band. Swift Runner came by frequently, ostensibly to trade information about game movements or to share news from the lower slopes. But Tala noticed how his visits always seemed to coincide with meal times, and how his eyes followed her as she moved around the lodge. "He likes you," Coda said one evening after Swift Runner had left. Tala felt heat rise in her cheeks. "He's just friendly. He's interested. He's a good man, good hunter, from a respected family. You could do worse. I'm not looking for a husband." "Why not?" The question caught Tala off guard. She'd been so focused on learning, on building her new life, that she hadn't thought about what might come next. Marriage, children, the normal progression of a woman's life. "I don't know," she said honestly. "After everything with Frank and McCready, the idea of belonging to someone makes my skin crawl. Swift Runner wouldn't own you. Our marriages aren't like that. Man and woman choose each other, work together, but each keeps their own autonomy. If it doesn't work, they separate. No shame in it." "Is that how it was with you and Winter Moon?" Coda was quiet for a moment, staring into the fire. "Yes. We chose each other freely, worked well together. When she got sick, she told me not to spend my life grieving. She said find someone else when the time was right, someone who would share the work and the warmth. She was practical, even at the end." "Do you think you will? Find someone else?" He met her eyes across the fire, and something passed between them. A recognition, a possibility neither of them was ready to name. "Maybe," Coda said, "when the time is right." The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Tala found herself thinking about it long after Coda had gone to sleep. She'd been living in his lodge for months now, sharing meals and work and the intimate rhythms of daily life. They'd become partners in a way that went beyond teacher and student. But what exactly were they to each other? The question remained unanswered as summer deepened. Tala pushed it aside and focused on her learning. Gray Owl Woman was a demanding teacher, expecting Tala to remember every detail, every preparation, every warning about dosage and timing. "A healer who forgets kills people," the old woman said sternly when Tala confused two similar-looking roots. "You must know these plants like you know your own hands, in the dark, in the rain, when you're exhausted and someone is dying and there's no time to second-guess yourself." So Tala studied with fierce concentration. She made detailed drawings of each plant in a book Coda had traded for, precious paper filled with sketches and notes in English mixed with Apache words she was beginning to learn. She tested herself constantly, gathering plants and identifying them before checking with Gray Owl Woman to see if she was right. Her accuracy improved. By midsummer, she could identify 50 medicinal plants on site and knew their uses, preparations, and potential dangers. Gray Owl Woman began teaching her about combinations, how certain plants worked better together, how others should never be mixed. "Healing is like cooking," the old woman said. "You must know not just the ingredients, but how they interact. This plant with this one creates medicine. This plant with that one creates poison. The difference can be a single leaf." One afternoon in late summer, a rider appeared on the trail to the lodge. Tala saw him first, a young boy, maybe 10 years old, riding hard, his face streaked with tears. Coda emerged from the lodge as the boy slid off his horse and ran to him, speaking rapidly in Apache. Coda's expression grew grave. He turned to Tala. "It's Singing Waters. She's trying to give birth, but the baby won't come. She's been laboring for 2 days. They need a healer." Tala's stomach clenched with fear. Gray Owl Woman. "Is 3 days travel away visiting another band. You're the closest thing to a healer they have right now. But I've never delivered a baby. Gray Owl Woman hasn't taught me that yet." Coda gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You know more than anyone else available. You have to try." The boy was crying openly now, pleading in Apache. Tala understood enough to know he was begging for help, saying his mother was dying. Everything in Tala wanted to refuse. She wasn't ready. She didn't know enough. She could make things worse, could kill both mother and child through ignorance. But Gray Owl Woman's words came back to her. The spirits choose people who are willing to serve, to carry the burden of knowing. "Tell him I'll come," Tala said. "Tell him I'll do everything I can." She gathered her medicine basket, filling it with herbs she thought might be useful. Blue cohosh for encouraging labor, shepherd's purse for bleeding, yarrow for pain. Coda saddled his horse, and they rode together with the boy leading the way, moving as fast as the terrain allowed. The camp was an hour's ride away, tucked in a valley where several families had gathered for the summer hunt. They arrived to find people clustered outside one of the shelters, their faces etched with worry. Morning light emerged as Tala dismounted. Her expression was grim. "She's very weak. The baby is stuck somehow. We've tried everything we know. Let me see her." Inside the shelter, Singing Waters lay on furs, her face gray with exhaustion and pain. Her twin daughters huddled in a corner, watching with frightened eyes. The woman's belly was hugely distended, and Tala could see the occasional contraction ripple across it. Tala knelt beside her and spoke in the mix of English and Apache she'd learned. "I'm here to help. Can you tell me what's happening?" Singing Waters' eyes focused on her with difficulty. "The baby won't come. I push and push, but nothing happens. Just pain." "When did the labor start?" 2 days ago. Started normal. Contractions came regular, but then they stopped helping. The baby stopped moving down." Tala had watched animals give birth and had helped Coda deliver a calf once when a cow was struggling. She knew the basic mechanics. But human birth was different, more complex, more dangerous. She washed her hands in water that had been boiled and cooled, then gently examined Singing Waters. What she found made her heart sink. The baby was positioned wrong. She could feel the buttocks instead of the head. A breech birth. The most dangerous kind. Morning Light leaned close. "Can you help her?" "The baby is breech. Coming bottom first instead of head first. That's why it's stuck." "What can you do?" Tala's mind raced through everything she'd learned, everything she'd observed. Gray Owl Woman had mentioned breech births once, saying they were dangerous, but sometimes the baby could be turned from outside. "I can try to turn the baby. Rotate it into the right position, but it's risky. I could hurt the baby or cause bleeding." "If you do nothing, they both die," Morning Light said bluntly. It wasn't really a choice. Tala mixed a tea from the blue cohosh and some willow bark for pain, helping Singing Waters drink it despite her weakness. Then she placed her hands on the distended belly and felt for the baby's position. "This will hurt," she warned, "but I need you to stay as still as possible." Singing Waters nodded, her jaw clenched. Tala began to push, gently but firmly, trying to rotate the baby inside the womb. Singing Waters gasped with pain. Tala could feel the resistance. The baby was wedged in position, reluctant to move. "Help me," she said to Morning Light. "Hold her shoulders. Keep her steady." Morning Light moved to Singing Waters' head, bracing her. Tala pushed harder, using techniques she'd seen Coda use when repositioning a calf. The baby shifted slightly. Then a little more. Singing Waters cried out, and for a horrible moment Tala thought she'd caused internal damage. But then she felt it, the baby completing the rotation, the head moving down into position. "It worked," she breathed. "The baby's turned." Morning Light spoke rapidly in Apache to the people waiting outside. Tala could hear prayers being offered, voices raised in hope. But the danger wasn't over. Singing Waters was exhausted, barely conscious. The baby was in position now, but would she have the strength to push it out? Tala made another tea, this one stronger, designed to stimulate contractions. She helped Singing Waters drink it, then massaged her belly in the way Gray Owl Woman had demonstrated, encouraging the womb to contract. For long minutes, nothing happened. Then Singing Waters gasped as a contraction hit, stronger than before. "That's good," Tala encouraged. "When the next one comes, push with everything you have." The labor continued for another hour. Tala stayed beside Singing Waters, coaching her through each contraction, watching for signs of bleeding or distress. Morning light brought water, wiped Singing Waters' face, whispered encouragement in Apache. Finally, as the sun began to set, the baby's head crowned. "One more push," Tala urged. "Come on, you can do this." Singing Waters gathered her remaining strength and pushed. The baby slid free into Tala's waiting hands, a tiny, perfect boy, covered in blood and vernix, his face scrunched and angry. For a terrifying moment he didn't breathe. Tala cleared his mouth and nose, rubbed his back, willing him to live. Then he gasped and let out a wail that filled the shelter. The sound was the most beautiful thing Tala had ever heard. She wrapped the baby in soft leather and handed him to Singing Waters, whose exhausted face transformed with joy. Morning light was crying openly. Outside, the people began to sing. Tala delivered the afterbirth, checked for bleeding, cleaned and cared for both mother and child with hands that shook from released tension. When she was finally satisfied that both would survive, she stepped outside the shelter. The whole camp was there, waiting. When they saw her emerge, they erupted in celebration. Children ran to hug her. Women pressed food into her hands. Men clasped her shoulders in thanks. Koda stood apart from the others, watching. When their eyes met, he nodded once, a gesture of respect that meant more than any words could. Stan's Tall approached, his weathered face showing rare emotion. "You saved 2 lives today. This is not a small thing. The people will remember." "I was terrified," Tala admitted. "I almost killed them both." "But you didn't. You trusted your knowledge and your instincts. This is what healers do." He paused. "Gray Owl Woman will be proud when she hears." That night there was a feast. Tala sat beside Singing Waters, who held her new son while her twin daughters crowded close to stare at their baby brother. "Thank you," Singing Waters said quietly. "You gave me my life back, gave my children their mother. I won't forget this. I'm just glad it worked." "No, not just glad it worked. You were brave enough to try when you weren't sure. That takes more courage than knowing." Swift Runner appeared with a plate of food, settling beside Tala with easy familiarity. "The whole mountain will be talking about this. The new healer who saved Singing Waters and her son. You're famous now." "I don't want to be famous. I just want to help people." "Then you chose the right path." He smiled at her, and Tala found herself smiling back. Maybe Koda was right. Maybe Swift Runner was a good man worth considering. But when she looked across the fire and saw Koda watching her, something in her chest tightened with a feeling she couldn't quite name. They returned to the lodge late that night, riding through darkness lit only by stars. Tala was exhausted, drained in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. She'd held life and death in her hands today. The weight of that responsibility was just beginning to sink in. "You did well," Koda said as they unsaddled the horse. "Better than well. You stayed calm when most people would have panicked." "I was panicking. I just didn't show it." "That's the same thing as being calm. What matters is what you do, not what you feel while doing it." They entered the lodge and Koda built up the fire while Tala collapsed onto her sleeping furs. Every muscle ached. Her hands were stained with blood she hadn't completely washed off. "Koda," she said quietly, "what if I'd failed? What if both of them had died?" He sat across from her, his face thoughtful in the firelight. "Then you would have tried and failed. That's different from not trying at all. Every healer loses patience sometimes. Gray Owl Woman has. Your grandmother did. You will too, eventually. The important thing is that you try, that you use everything you know, that you don't give up. How do you live with it? When you fail, you honor their memory by learning from it, by doing better next time, by carrying them with you so their death teaches you how to save the next person." It was a hard truth, but Tala found comfort in it. Failure was inevitable. What mattered was what she did with it. She slept deeply that night and woke to find the lodge filled with morning light and the smell of cooking meat. Koda had let her sleep late, unusual for him. When she emerged from her furs, he handed her food and tea without comment. Gray Owl Woman sent a message, he said. She heard what happened. She's coming back early to continue your training. She says you're ready for more advanced knowledge now. Because I delivered one baby? Because you proved you can handle pressure, that you'll act even when you're afraid. Those are the qualities that matter most in a healer. Over the following weeks, Gray Owl Woman intensified Tala's training. They worked from dawn until dark, gathering plants, preparing medicines, practicing techniques until Tala could perform them in her sleep. Childbirth is just the beginning, Gray Owl Woman said. You need to know how to treat wounds, infections, fevers, poisoning, broken bones. You need to understand when to act and when to let the body heal itself. You need to learn the prayers and songs that accompany the medicine. Tala absorbed it all with desperate hunger. Each new piece of knowledge felt like armor against the chaos of the world, protection against helplessness. Word of the successful birth spread through the mountain communities. People began appearing at the lodge seeking Tala's help. A child with a persistent cough, an elder with joint pain, a young man who'd gashed his leg on a sharp rock. Tala treated them all, consulting with Gray Owl Woman when she was uncertain, trusting her growing instincts when she wasn't. Most of her patients improved. A few didn't. She learned to accept both outcomes with equal humility. As summer faded toward autumn, Tala realized she'd completely stopped thinking about her old life. The mining camp, Frank, McCready, the person she'd been. It all felt like a story that had happened to someone else. She was Tala now. Healer, granddaughter of Red Thread Woman, member of the mountain community. The transformation was complete. One evening, as she and Koda prepared their evening meal, he said, "You've been here 6 months now. I never asked if you wanted to stay permanently or if you were just waiting for the right time to leave." Tala looked around the lodge, at the herbs hanging from the rafters, the tools they'd made together, the fire that had become as familiar as breathing. She thought about morning light and singing waters and Gray Owl Woman, about the children who now ran to her when she visited the camps, about the knowledge flowing through her hands like water, ancient and new at the same time. "I'm staying," she said simply. "This is my home. These are my people. Where else would I go?" Koda's face remained neutral, but she caught the flash of relief in his eyes. "Good," he said, "because winter's coming, and I'd hate to have to teach someone else how to bank the fire properly." It was as close to sentiment as Koda ever got. Tala smiled and returned to cutting vegetables for their stew, content in a way she'd never imagined possible. The mountain had claimed her, and she had claimed it back. She was no longer running from anything. She was running toward everything that mattered, and she'd found it here among the peaks and valleys, the ancient trees and rushing streams, the people who'd taken her in and made her one of their own. She was home, and home, she was learning, wasn't a place you found. It was something you built, day by day, choice by choice, until the foundation was so strong nothing could shake it. The first snow arrived in late October, dusting the peaks white, while the valleys still held the gold and crimson of autumn. Tala stood outside the lodge watching the flakes drift down through the pine branches, each one catching the morning light before melting on her outstretched palm. The air smelled of wood smoke and approaching winter, that particular sharpness that meant the mountain was preparing to sleep beneath its blanket of ice and snow. Behind her, Koda emerged carrying an armload of firewood. He'd been stockpiling for weeks, cutting and splitting until they had enough to last through the deepest cold. The wood was stacked against the lodge's north wall, covered with hides to keep it dry. "First snow means the hunting will change," he said, setting down his burden. "Elk will move to lower elevations. Deer will yard up in the thick timber. We need to get as much meat as we can before the deep snows come." Tala turned to face him. In the months since summer, she'd grown comfortable with the rhythm of preparing for winter, the endless gathering, drying, storing. Every day brought new tasks designed to keep them alive when the mountain turned hostile. "I set more snares yesterday," she said, "and Gray Owl Woman showed me where the winter greens grow under the snow. We won't starve." "No," Koda agreed. "We won't starve. But we need to be smart, careful. Winter up here doesn't forgive mistakes." They worked together throughout the morning, Tala preparing medicines while Koda reinforced the lodge's roof with fresh bark and hides. The work was familiar now, their movements synchronized from months of partnership. They spoke little but communicated constantly through gesture and glance, each anticipating what the other needed. Around midday, Swift Runner appeared on the trail, leading a pack horse loaded with supplies. He'd been making these visits more frequently as autumn progressed, always with some excuse, bringing news from the camps, delivering a message from Stan's Tall, offering to help with heavy work. But Tala knew the real reason. She saw it in the way his eyes sought hers, in the careful attention he paid to her words, in the small gifts he brought, a particularly fine piece of flint, a string of beads, a rabbit already cleaned and ready for cooking. "I brought extra salt," Swift Runner said, sliding off his horse. "Thought you might need it for preserving meat." "Thank you," Tala said. "That's thoughtful." Kota emerged from the lodge and greeted Swift Runner in Apache. The two men spoke for a few minutes while Tala continued grinding herbs with a stone mortar. She didn't need to understand every word to know they were discussing her. When Swift Runner left an hour later, Kota watched him go with an unreadable expression. "He's going to ask you to marry him," Kota said finally, "probably at the winter gathering." Tala's hand stilled on the mortar. "How do you know?" "Because he asked my permission to court you properly. Said he's been waiting for the right time." "And what did you tell him?" "That you make your own choices. That I have no authority over you." Kota paused, his eyes meeting hers. "But I also told him he was a good man and would be lucky to have you say yes." Something twisted in Tala's chest. "You think I should accept him?" "I think you should decide what you want. Swift Runner can give you a good life. He's respected, skilled, from a strong family. He'd treat you well. You'd have children, a place in the community, security." "I already have a place in the community. I'm a healer." "You know what I mean." Kota's voice was careful, measured. "You'd have a husband, a family of your own. That's what most women want." "Is it what you think I should want?" The question hung between them. Kota turned away, busying himself with adjusting the woodpile. "I think," he said slowly, "that you should have everything you deserve. Everything that was stolen from you when you were promised to McCready. Choice, freedom, love, if you want it." "And what about what you want?" Kota went very still. When he spoke again, his voice was rough. "What I want doesn't matter. I'm not the one being courted." But it did matter. Tala realized with sudden clarity that it mattered more than anything. She'd been living in Kota's lodge for 8 months now, sharing his space and his life, working beside him day after day. Somewhere along the way, partnership had become something deeper. She opened her mouth to say this, but before she could find the words, a shout echoed from the forest below. Both she and Kota turned to see a figure stumbling up the trail, a young woman, moving frantically, calling out in Apache. Kota ran to meet her. Tala grabbed her medicine basket and followed. The woman was from Morning Light's camp, her face streaked with tears. She spoke rapidly to Kota, gesturing back down the trail. Kota's expression grew grim. "What happened?" Tala demanded. "Miners from Iron Hollow Ridge. They came to the lower camp looking for someone who stole from them. When the people said they knew nothing about it, the miners started destroying things, tearing down shelters, scattering food stores. Morning Light tried to stop them, and they hit her. She's hurt badly." Rage flooded through Tala, hot and fierce. "Take me to her." They moved quickly down the mountain, the young woman leading them to a camp in chaos. Shelters had been torn apart, possessions scattered across the ground. Several people nursed injuries, a man with a gashed forehead, a woman cradling a broken arm, children crying in their mother's arms. Morning Light lay inside one of the few intact shelters, her face swollen and discolored. Someone had split her lip and blackened both eyes. Tala could see the distinctive mark of knuckles across her cheekbone. "Who did this?" Tala asked, kneeling beside her cousin. "Bull McCready." Morning Light's voice was thick, distorted by her injured mouth. "He said someone from our camp stole supplies from the mine. Said we're all thieves and savages. When I told him to leave, he struck me. Said I should learn to show respect to white men." The name hit Tala like a physical blow. McCready. The man her stepfather had sold her to. The man she'd run from almost a year ago. "Was my stepfather with him?" "No, just McCready and 3 others. They left after they finished wrecking the camp. Said they'd be back if anything else went missing." Tala forced herself to focus on immediate needs. She examined Morning Light's injuries, bruised ribs, possible concussion, lacerations that would need cleaning. Nothing life-threatening, but painful and humiliating. She worked methodically, cleaning wounds, applying salves, preparing pain medicine. Around her, Coda and others from the band were gathering the scattered possessions, trying to salvage what they could. Food stores that had been trampled into the dirt, hides that had been slashed, tools that had been broken out of spite. By the time Tala finished treating the injured, the sun was setting. Tall arrived with several warriors, his face dark with controlled fury when he saw the destruction. He spoke at length in Apache. Coda translated quietly for Tala. He says this cannot stand, that the white miners have gone too far, that if we don't respond, they'll think they can attack us whenever they want. What will he do? He's calling a council. Tomorrow night, all the bands will send representatives. We'll decide together how to handle this. That night, Tala stayed with Morning Light, while Coda returned to their lodge to gather supplies. She sat beside her cousin in the darkness, listening to her labored breathing, feeling rage simmer beneath her skin. Morning Light had welcomed her, claimed her as family, helped her find her place among the people, and McCready had struck her like she was nothing, like all of them were nothing. "I'm sorry," Morning Light whispered. "I should have kept my mouth shut, should have let them do what they wanted." "No," Tala's voice was fierce. "You had every right to defend your home. This isn't your fault. It's theirs. But now there will be trouble. The elders will want revenge. Men will fight. People will die. Then people will die. But not because you spoke up, because men like McCready think they can do whatever they want without consequences." Morning Light was quiet for a long moment. "You know him, the one who hit me. You ran from him." "Yes, but does he know you're here? That you're one of us now?" "I don't think so. It's been almost a year. He probably thinks I'm dead." "And if he finds out you're alive, what then?" Tala didn't have an answer. She thought she was safe in the mountains, beyond the reach of her old life, but Iron Hollow Ridge was only a day's ride away. The miners had always known the Apache camps were up here. They'd just never cared enough to cause trouble before. Something had changed, and Tala had a sinking feeling that whatever came next, it would be worse than scattered supplies and bruised faces. The council gathered the following evening at a neutral site, a sheltered valley where all the bands met for important decisions. Tala attended with Coda, sitting among the healers and women, while the warriors and elders formed an inner circle around the fire. Tall spoke first, describing the attack on Morning Light's camp. Other voices joined in, reporting similar incidents over the past months. Miners trespassing on traditional hunting grounds, cutting trees without permission, fouling streams with their mining operations. "They're getting bolder," said a warrior named Black Wolf. "They think because we don't fight back, we're weak. We need to show them we're not." "And how do we do that?" asked Grey Owl Woman. "By attacking their camp, killing their people? That brings soldiers, brings war. We can't win that fight." "So we do nothing?" Black Wolf's voice rose with frustration. "We let them beat our women? Destroy our camps? Where does it end?" Tall raised his hand for silence. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of years and wisdom. "We cannot match them in numbers or weapons, but we can make it too costly for them to continue. We can make the mountain inhospitable to them. We can show them that some things are not worth the price." What are you suggesting?" someone asked. "Strategic resistance. We don't attack their camp directly, but we make their operations difficult. Their equipment fails, their supplies disappear, their workers get spooked and leave. We become the ghosts they fear in the darkness." It was a subtle plan, designed to drive the miners away without triggering open war. The council debated for hours, voices rising and falling around the fire. Some wanted direct confrontation. Others counseled patience. A few suggested abandoning these mountains entirely and moving to more remote areas. Finally, Tall called for a decision. By traditional consensus, the council agreed to his plan. They would not attack, but they would resist. Make the mountain unwelcoming. Remind the miners that this land belonged to the people who'd lived here long before gold was discovered. As the council broke up, Coda pulled Tala aside. "This is going to get dangerous. The miners won't understand the subtlety. They'll just see their operations being disrupted and blame all Apache people. There could be retaliation." "I know. You should consider leaving. going to one of the more remote camps until this settles. Tala looked at him in disbelief. You think I'd run now, when my people are in danger? I think you've already run once and barely survived. I think you're too valuable as a healer to risk in whatever's coming. That's exactly why I need to stay. When people get hurt, and they will, they'll need someone who can help them. Koda's jaw tightened, but he didn't argue further. They rode back to the lodge in tense silence. The resistance began within days. Miners reported equipment stolen or sabotaged, horses that broke free in the night and scattered, supplies that spoiled mysteriously. Workers who swore they saw figures in the forest, watching, waiting. The Apache warriors moved like ghosts, striking only when the miners were vulnerable, vanishing before anyone could respond. They took no lives but created constant disruption and fear. The miners' response was predictable. They increased patrols, hired more armed guards, started sending larger groups into the mountains to search for the camps. Tala treated a steady stream of people injured in the escalating conflict. A warrior who'd been grazed by a bullet during a supply raid. A young woman who'd twisted her ankle fleeing from miners who'd gotten too close to her camp. An elder suffering from exhaustion after his band had to relocate quickly to avoid discovery. The work was endless. Tala moved between camps, her medicine basket always full, her hands constantly busy. She slept little, ate less, driven by the knowledge that every person she saved was a victory against those who thought her people were worthless. One night in early December, she returned to the lodge to find Swift Runner waiting with Koda. Both men wore grim expressions. "What's wrong?" Tala asked. Swift Runner spoke in halting English. "Miners planning something big. Heard them talking in Valley. They're going to attack Morning Light's camp tomorrow morning. Want to teach us a lesson." Tala's blood went cold. "How many miners?" 20, maybe more, all armed. "We need to warn them. Get everyone out before—" "Already done," Koda interrupted. "Morning Light's band is moving to the winter camp tonight. They'll be gone before the miners arrive." "But our supplies are there, our winter stores. If the miners destroy everything, then we rebuild. Better that than lose lives." It was the right decision. Tala knew that. But it galled her that they had to keep retreating, keep giving ground, keep letting the miners drive them deeper into the mountains. "This can't continue," she said. "Eventually, we'll run out of places to retreat to." "I know." Koda's voice was heavy. "Stands Tall knows it too. But what choice do we have? Fight and die, or retreat and survive?" Swift Runner spoke up. "There is third choice. We find who really stole from mines. Prove it wasn't us. Make peace." "The miners don't want peace," Tala said bitterly. "They want us gone so they can take whatever they want from these mountains." The conversation was interrupted by sounds outside. Horses, voices calling in Apache. Koda and Swift Runner went to investigate while Tala prepared for whatever emergency had arrived. But it wasn't an emergency. It was Stands Tall, accompanied by several elders and warriors. Their faces were grave as they entered the lodge. Stands Tall spoke to Koda at length. Tala watched Koda's expression shift from confusion to shock to something that looked like anger. "What is it?" she demanded. "What's happening?" Koda turned to her, his eyes dark. "The miners didn't just plan to attack Morning Light's camp. They came to the council site tonight. They've been watching, learning our patterns. They know about the gatherings. And they grabbed 2 people who were traveling late, took them prisoner." Tala's heart hammered. "Who?" "Gray Owl Woman." Koda's voice was tight. "And Singing Waters with her baby." The world seemed to tilt. Gray Owl Woman, who'd taught Tala everything she knew about healing. Singing Waters, whose life and child Tala had saved just months ago, both now in the hands of men like McCready. "Why would they take hostages?" Tala asked, though she already knew the answer. Stands Tall replied in English, his accent thick but his meaning clear. "They sent message. They want the stealing to stop. Want the one responsible to turn themselves in. If not, the prisoners die. But no one from our band stole anything. They don't care about truth. They care about control, about making us submit." Rage and helplessness warred in Tala's chest. She thought about Gray Owl Woman's weathered hands teaching her to prepare medicine, about Singing Water's new son, barely 4 months old, held captive in a mining camp full of dangerous men. "We have to get them back," she said. "How?" Swift Runner asked. "We have maybe 50 warriors. They have hundreds of miners, all armed. Camp is like fortress. We attack, everyone dies. Then we negotiate. We offer them something they want. We have nothing they want except our land, and they'll take that anyway." Tala's mind raced, searching for options, finding none. They were trapped by circumstances, by numbers, by the fundamental injustice of men with guns facing people who just wanted to be left alone. An idea began to form. Terrible. Dangerous. But possibly the only chance they had. "They want someone to blame," Tala said slowly. "Someone to punish for the thefts and disruptions." "Yes," Stans Tall confirmed. "They want scapegoat." "Then give them one. Give them me." The lodge erupted. Coda grabbed her arm. "Absolutely not. You're not going anywhere near that camp." "Why not?" "I ran from there. I embarrassed McCready. I'm the perfect target for their anger." "Which is exactly why we won't let you go back." Tala pulled free from his grip, her voice rising. "You said I make my own choices. This is my choice. Gray Owl Woman saved my life by teaching me. Singing Waters trusts me with hers. I won't let them die when I can do something to help." "You'll die too." Coda's control was cracking. "You think McCready will just accept your surrender and let everyone go? He'll take you and keep the others. He'll make an example of all of you." "Maybe. Or maybe he'll be so satisfied to have the girl who escaped him that he'll release the others. It's a chance." "It's suicide." Stans Tall held up his hand. "Let her speak. What is your plan, Tala?" She took a breath, organizing her thoughts. "I go to the camp. Tell them I'm the one who's been causing trouble, stealing supplies, sabotaging equipment. I say I did it for revenge against McCready. I offer myself in exchange for the hostages." "And then?" Gray Owl Woman's apprentice asked. "And then you come get me. After the hostages are safe, mount a rescue." "That's not a plan," Coda said harshly. "That's a desperate hope." "Do you have a better idea?" No one answered. Stans Tall studied Tala with those sharp eyes that saw everything. "You would do this? Willingly walk into danger for people who are not your blood family?" "They are my family. All of you. The mountain gave me a home when I had none. The people gave me purpose when I'd lost everything. This is how I repay that gift." The old man was quiet for a long time. Finally, he spoke in Apache. Coda translated reluctantly. "He says you have the heart of a warrior and the soul of a healer, that you honor your grandmother's memory. But he also says this choice is too big for you to make alone. The whole community shares the risk." "Then let the community decide," Tala said. "Call another council, tonight. Let everyone vote on whether I should go." It took 2 hours to gather enough representatives for a legitimate council. They met in the lodge, crowded around the fire, voices overlapping in heated debate. Some supported Tala's plan, seeing it as the only way to save the hostages without triggering a massacre. Others argued it was too risky, that they should find another way. A few suggested abandoning Gray Owl Woman and Singing Waters to their fate, harsh as that sounded, to preserve the larger community. Tala listened to it all, her resolve hardening with each argument against action. These were her people, her family. She would not abandon them to satisfy someone else's fear. When everyone had spoken, Stans Tall called for the decision. The vote was close, but ultimately the council agreed. Tala would go to Iron Hollow Ridge at dawn. She would offer herself in exchange for the hostages. And if the miners accepted, the warriors would give them 3 days before mounting a rescue attempt. 3 days for Tala to survive in the hands of men who'd already proven their cruelty. After the council dispersed, Coda refused to speak to her. He sat by the fire, his face carved from stone, radiating fury and fear in equal measure. "You should have asked me first," he finally said. "Would you have said yes?" "No." "Then why would I ask?" He stood abruptly, his control shattering. "Because I've spent 8 months teaching you to survive, and now you're throwing it all away. Because Gray Owl Woman would never forgive me if I let you do this. Because—" He stopped, his voice breaking. "Because why, Coda?" He turned away from her, shoulders rigid. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. "Because I can't lose you the way I lost her." The admission hung in the air between them. Tala moved to stand beside him, not touching, just close. I'm not Winter Moon, she said gently, and I'm not trying to replace her. But Coda, you taught me that we honor the dead by living well, by being brave, by standing up for what matters. This matters. So do you. She reached for his hand. He let her take it, his calloused fingers closing around hers with desperate strength. I'll come back, Tala said. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep. Then trust me to keep this one. They stood together as the fire burned low, both knowing that dawn would come too soon, and with it, choices neither of them wanted but both had to accept. Dawn broke cold and gray over the mountains, the sun hidden behind clouds that promised snow. Tala stood outside the lodge dressed in the simplest clothing she owned, a plain buckskin dress, worn moccasins, her hair braided simply down her back. She'd removed all her beadwork, all the marks of belonging to the mountain people. She needed to look like what the miners expected, a frightened girl surrendering, not a woman who'd found her strength. But she kept her grandmother's locket hidden beneath her dress, the red thread coiled inside, pressing against her heart. Coda emerged carrying supplies he'd packed despite his opposition to the plan. Dried meat, a water skin, a small knife concealed in the folds of a blanket. Things she might need if the miners didn't kill her immediately. Swift Runner and 3 others will shadow you from the tree line, he said, his voice flat. If things go wrong before you even reach the camp, they'll intervene. And if things go wrong after? Then we come for you in 3 days, as planned. 3 days, 72 hours. It seemed like an eternity and no time at all. Stan's Tall arrived with morning light, who despite her healing injuries had insisted on coming. She embraced Tala fiercely, speaking in rapid Apache that Coda translated. She says you carry the courage of Red Thread Woman. That your grandmother would be proud. That she'll pray for your safe return at every moment until you're back. Tell her to take care of Coda while I'm gone. Make sure he doesn't do anything foolish. Morning Light managed a weak smile through her swollen face. She pressed something into Tala's hand, a small leather pouch on a cord. Medicine, she said in English. For pain. For sleep if you need. Hide it well. Tala tucked the pouch inside her dress next to the locket. Small comfort, but comfort nonetheless. The hardest part was saying goodbye to Coda. They stood facing each other while the others gave them privacy, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them like the gray clouds overhead. When you come back, Coda started. When I come back, Tala interrupted, we'll finish the conversation we started, about what we both want, about what comes next. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with a tenderness that made her chest ache. You have to come back for that conversation to happen. I will. I told you. I keep my promises. He pulled her close then, wrapping her in an embrace that felt like both goodbye and a vow. She breathed in the familiar scent of him, wood smoke and leather and pine. Memorized the feel of his arms around her, the steady beat of his heart against her ear. 3 days, he whispered into her hair. If you're not out by then, I'm coming in regardless of the plan. 3 days, she agreed. They separated and Tala forced herself to walk away without looking back. If she looked back, she might not have the courage to keep going. Swift Runner and his warriors followed at a distance as she descended the mountain toward Iron Hollow Ridge. The mining camp sprawled across a valley that had once been pristine wilderness, now scarred with pit mines and sluice operations. Piles of tailings dotted the landscape like open sores. The creek that had once run clear now ran gray with sediment. Tala had forgotten how ugly it all was, how the sound of the stamp mill pounded the air like a headache, how the smoke from dozens of fires created a pall that blocked out the sky. This had been her world once. The thought made her sick. She walked directly to the camp's center, where the largest buildings clustered around what passed for a main street. Miners stopped their work to stare as she passed. Whispers followed her. A few men she recognized from her time here, though most were strangers drawn by the promise of gold. The mine office sat at the end of the street, a rough-hewn building that served as McCready's headquarters. Tala climbed the steps and pushed open the door. McCready sat behind a scarred desk, studying maps of the surrounding territory. He looked up when she entered, and his expression cycled through surprise, recognition, and savage satisfaction. Well, well. He stood slowly, a predator scenting prey. Little Eliza Carter, back from the dead. My name is Tala. Her voice was steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. I don't care what the savages call you. You're still the girl who ran from me. The girl who cost me money and made me look like a fool. He circled around the desk. Where have you been hiding? In the mountains, with the Apache bands. And you just decided to walk back here out of the goodness of your heart? No, I came because you have two people who don't deserve what you're doing to them. An old woman and a mother with an infant. They had nothing to do with the thefts. I did. McCready's eyebrows rose. You? You've been stealing from my operations? Yes. The missing supplies, the sabotaged equipment, all of it. I wanted revenge for what you and Frank tried to do to me, so I've been causing problems ever since I left. It was a lie, but McCready wanted someone to blame and she was offering herself up. She could see him weighing it, deciding if he believed her. You expect me to think one girl did all that damage? I learned from the Apache. They taught me how to move unseen, how to strike and vanish. I'm better trained than you'd imagine. Prove it. Tell me something only the thief would know. Tala's mind raced. She knew details from reports the warriors had shared, information about which operations had been hit and how. She rattled off specifics, the tool shed raid on November 3rd, the supply wagon that lost a wheel on the mountain pass, the horses that scattered from the corral 2 weeks ago. McCready's eyes narrowed, but she could see belief settling in. He wanted it to be true. Wanted a single target for his rage. All right, say I believe you. What do you want? Release the hostages, the old woman and the young mother. They're innocent. Let them go and you can do whatever you want with me. I surrender, completely. And I'm supposed to trust you won't run again the first chance you get? Where would I run? You know I'm connected to the mountain people now. If I escape, you'll just take more hostages. I won't risk that. McCready studied her for a long moment. Then he smiled, and it was the smile of a man who'd just won something he'd been denied too long. Frank, he bellowed, get in here. The door opened and her stepfather shuffled in, older and more worn than Tala remembered. When he saw her, his jaw dropped. Eliza, what in the hell? The girl's come back, McCready said. Says she's been stealing from us. Says she'll surrender in exchange for the Apache prisoners. Frank's eyes darted between them. You believe her? Doesn't matter if I believe her. What matters is we get someone to make an example of, and she's volunteering. Go get the savages. Bring them here. Frank left, and McCready circled Tala like a wolf with cornered prey. You've changed. Stronger. Harder. Mountain life agrees with you. Let them go, Tala said, ignoring his observation. That was the deal. The deal happens when I say it happens. Minutes crawled by. Tala stood motionless, refusing to show fear, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. Finally, Frank returned, shoving Gray Owl Woman and Singing Waters into the office. The baby was crying, a thin wail that cut through the tension. Gray Owl Woman's face was bruised, but her eyes were sharp, taking in everything. When she saw Tala, her expression shifted to alarm. She spoke rapidly in Apache. She's telling you not to do this, McCready said, saying you're foolish. Too bad she doesn't get a vote. Tala met Gray Owl Woman's eyes and spoke in the Apache she'd learned. Trust me. 3 days. The old woman's face showed understanding. She quieted, though her eyes remained troubled. McCready grabbed Tala's arm. Frank, take the savages to the edge of camp and turn them loose. Tell them if any Apache come near this place again, we'll burn their camps and kill everyone we find. This is their one warning. What about the girl? Frank asked. The girl stays with me. She's got a debt to pay. Frank hesitated, something almost like regret crossing his face. McCready, maybe we should just... Did I ask your opinion? Get them out of here, now! Frank ushered Gray Owl Woman and Singing Waters toward the door. As they passed, Gray Owl Woman's hand brushed Tala's, a brief contact that conveyed both blessing and farewell. Then they were gone, and Tala was alone with McCready. He released her arm and walked back to his desk, pouring whiskey into a glass. You know what I've thought about every day since you ran? How good it was going to feel when I got my hands on you again. How I was going to make you regret embarrassing me. You got what you wanted. The hostages are released. I surrendered. What more do you need? I need you to understand your place. You're not some mountain warrior. You're property. Frank sold you to me fair and square, and running away doesn't change that. Frank had no right to sell me. I'm not livestock. McCready's hand shot out, catching her across the face hard enough to snap her head sideways. Pain exploded through her jaw. She tasted blood. You don't get to tell me what rights I have. This is my camp, my rules, and you're going to learn to follow them. Tala straightened, touching her split lip. The violence was expected. She'd prepared for it. What mattered was surviving long enough for the rescue. 3 days. She could survive 3 days of anything. McCready locked her in a storage shed behind the office, a windowless space barely large enough to stand in. No light, no heat, just darkness and the sound of the camp outside. Tala sank to the dirt floor and let herself shake. Now that the confrontation was over, reaction set in. She'd walked into the lion's den and somehow convinced it not to eat her immediately. But the lion was still hungry, and she was still trapped. She found Morning Light's medicine pouch and the locket, clutching them both for comfort. Her face throbbed where McCready had struck her. It would bruise badly. But she was alive. Gray Owl Woman and Singing Waters were free. The first part of the plan had worked. Now she just had to survive until the second part. Time became meaningless in the darkness. Tala dozed fitfully, waking whenever sounds outside suggested someone approaching. Twice a day, Frank brought water and stale bread. He wouldn't meet her eyes, just shoved the provisions through the door and left quickly. On the second day, he lingered for a moment. I didn't know it would go this far, he said quietly. When I made that deal with McCready, I just wanted to clear my debts. You didn't think I was a person worth considering, Tala finished. You never did. Not when my mother was alive and not after she died. I wasn't cut out to be a father. No, you were cut out to be a drunk who sold children to pay for whiskey. I hope that knowledge keeps you warm at night. He flinched but didn't argue, just closed the door and locked it again. The third day arrived. Tala woke knowing that rescue would come tonight, one way or another. She prepared herself mentally, checking the small knife Coda had hidden in her blanket. It wasn't much of a weapon, but it was something. Late afternoon, McCready came for her. He dragged her out of the shed and into the office, where several other miners had gathered. All of them wore the hard expressions of men looking for entertainment in violence. Time to make an example, McCready announced. Show everyone what happens to thieves and runaways. Public whipping in the camp square at sunset. Everyone attends, no exceptions. Tala's blood went cold. A public whipping could cripple her, could destroy her ability to escape when the rescue came. She needed to be able to run, to fight if necessary. That wasn't the deal, she said. I surrendered. You released the hostages. We're even. We're even when I say we're even. McCready's face was flushed with whiskey and anticipation. You humiliated me. Now I return the favor. Then maybe we'll talk about what happens next. They tied her hands and marched her into the square as the sun began to set. The entire camp had gathered, hundreds of miners forming a circle around a post that had been set up for the occasion. Someone had already tied a whip to it, the leather dark with old bloodstains. Tala was forced to her knees, her hands bound to the post above her head. The position stretched her spine painfully, exposing her back. Someone tore the dress from her shoulders, and the cold air hit her bare skin. She could hear the crowd murmuring, a mixture of anticipation and discomfort. Not everyone wanted this, but no one was willing to stop it. McCready picked up the whip, testing its weight. 20 lashes, he announced. Count them out loud. If you lose count, we start over. The first strike came without warning, fire across her shoulders. Tala bit down hard to keep from screaming, forcing out one through clenched teeth. The second strike crossed the first, creating an X of agony. 2. By 5, she was struggling to breathe. By 10, the world had narrowed to nothing but pain and the desperate need to keep counting. Her back was a mass of torn flesh, blood soaking into what remained of her dress. Somewhere around 15, she heard shouting from the edge of camp. Gunfire. The organized chaos of an attack. McCready paused, whip raised for the next strike. What the hell? An arrow sprouted from his shoulder. He screamed and dropped the whip, staggering backward. More arrows flew into the square, precise shots that took down armed miners without hitting the crowd. Warriors poured into the camp from 3 directions, moving with coordinated precision. They weren't there to massacre. They were there to create chaos and extract Tala. Koda appeared beside her, cutting her bonds with swift strokes. Can you walk? Have to. Her voice was a rasp. He wrapped a blanket around her torn back and lifted her as easily as if she weighed nothing. Swift Runner and two others formed a protective circle as they fought their way back through the panicking crowd. Miners grabbed for weapons, but the warriors were already fading back, disappearing into the gathering darkness. The rescue had taken less than 5 minutes from start to finish. They carried Tala up into the mountains, moving quickly despite the darkness. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of Koda's arms around her, the steady rhythm of his movement, the voices of her people surrounding her with protection. When she woke, she was in the lodge. Gray Owl Woman knelt beside her, applying salve to her ravaged back with gentle hands. Morning Light sat nearby, mixing medicines. Koda stood by the entrance, his face a mask of controlled fury. "How bad?" Tala whispered. Gray Owl Woman answered in English. "Bad, but you will heal. Scars, yes, but the damage is not permanent. You were very brave. Or very stupid. Sometimes the same thing." The old woman finished treating her wounds and helped her drink a tea that dulled the pain and made her drowsy. As Tala's eyes drifted closed, she heard voices speaking in Apache outside the lodge. When she woke again, it was full dark. The lodge was quiet except for the crackling fire. Koda sat beside her sleeping platform, watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "How long was I out?" she asked. 6 hours. The medicine was strong." "The others? Gray Owl Woman and Singing Waters?" "Safe. Back with Morning Light's band. The baby is fine." He paused. "You saved them. The plan worked." "Not entirely. I wasn't supposed to get whipped. No, that wasn't supposed to happen." His voice was tight with suppressed emotion. "When I saw what he was doing to you, you came early. The plan was to wait until dark, slip in quietly. You attacked in daylight. I couldn't wait. Not after seeing—" He stopped, looking away. "I'm sorry. I should have gotten you out sooner." "You got me out alive. That's what matters." Silence fell between them. Tala shifted carefully, testing the limits of her injuries. Everything hurt, but the pain was manageable. She would heal. "There's something you should know," Koda said finally. "When we attacked the camp, Stan's Tall made it clear we weren't there for revenge. We extracted you and left. But he also sent a message to the mine leadership. Said if they ever take hostages again, if they ever attack our camps again, we'll respond with full force. We'll make the mountains so dangerous for them they'll abandon the operations entirely. Will they listen? Maybe, maybe not. But we drew a line, showed them we're not helpless, that there are consequences for their actions." "And McCready?" "Wounded but alive. The arrow went through his shoulder, not his heart. He'll recover." Koda's expression darkened. "Part of me wishes it had been a killing shot. But Stan's Tall is right. We're not murderers. We defend ourselves, we protect our own, but we don't kill unless we have no choice." Tala understood the wisdom in that, even if part of her wanted McCready to suffer the way he'd made others suffer. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now you heal. When you're strong enough, we'll discuss what comes next." "I already know what comes next." Tala met his eyes. "Before I left, we agreed to have a conversation when I got back, about what we both want." Koda was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion he usually kept hidden. "What I want is complicated. When Winter Moon died, I thought that part of my life was over. Thought I'd spend my remaining years alone, teaching skills, trading goods, existing, but not really living. Then you stumbled into my shelter half-frozen and desperate, and everything changed." "Changed how?" "You reminded me what it feels like to have a partner, to share the work and the fire and the silence, to wake up knowing someone else is there, someone who understands the mountain the way you do." He reached for her hand carefully, mindful of her injuries. "You're not Winter Moon. You'll never be her, and I don't want you to try. But you're Tala. Fire that returns. And I've come to realize I don't want to face another winter without you." Tala's heart swelled with emotion too big for words. "I don't want another winter without you either. Or another spring, or summer, or any season. This lodge, this mountain, you, this is my home now. Not just a place I'm staying until something better comes along. This is where I belong. And Swift Runner? He still wants to court you. Swift Runner is a good man, but he's not my man. He's not the one who saved my life, who taught me to survive, who saw me at my worst and chose to help anyway. You did that, Coda. You gave me the freedom to choose my life, and I choose this. I choose you. Coda leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted. When she didn't, he kissed her with a tenderness that made the pain in her back fade to nothing. It was a kiss of promise, of partnership, of two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and decided to build something lasting. When they separated, both were crying. Not from sadness, but from the overwhelming relief of finally acknowledging what had been growing between them for months. When you're healed, Coda said, we'll have the ceremony. Make it official in the eyes of the people, if you want that. I want that. I want all of it. The partnership, the commitment, the shared future. It won't be easy. The mountain is harsh. The work never ends. There will be winters when we barely have enough food, summers when drought threatens everything. We'll face danger from animals, from weather, from men who don't understand why we choose to live this way. I know, and I choose it anyway. I choose you. They sealed the promise with another kiss, this one deeper, more certain. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, covering the mountain in fresh white, erasing the scars of the past and offering a clean beginning. The healing took weeks. Gray Owl Woman tended Tala's back daily, applying medicines that prevented infection and promoted healing. The scars would be permanent, raised welts that mapped the price of her courage, but they healed clean and straight. During those weeks, the mountain community gathered to celebrate the successful rescue and to honor Tala's sacrifice. A feast was held, stories were told, and Stands Tall formally recognized her not just as a healer, but as a woman who'd proven her loyalty to the people beyond any doubt. Morning Light presented her with a new dress, this one even more beautifully beaded than the last. For the wedding, she said, every bride needs something special. The ceremony took place in early spring, when the snow was melting and the first flowers were pushing through the wet earth. The entire community gathered at the sacred valley, creating a circle around Tala and Coda as they stood before Stands Tall. The elder spoke in Apache, his words carrying the weight of tradition and blessing. Tala understood most of it now. Her language skills had improved dramatically over the winter months. He spoke of partnership, of two people choosing to walk together through all seasons, of the mountain witnessing their vow and holding them to it. Coda placed a necklace of worked silver around Tala's throat, a piece he'd crafted during the winter, its design incorporating elements of both Apache tradition and something uniquely their own. Tala gave him a blanket she'd woven, its pattern telling the story of their journey from strangers to partners. They spoke their vows in both English and Apache, making promises that were both practical and profound. To share the work, to honor each other's autonomy, to face whatever came together rather than alone. When Stands Tall pronounced them married in the eyes of the people and the mountain, the community erupted in celebration. There was singing, dancing, feasting that lasted well into the night. Children ran wild. Elders told stories. Young couples looked at each other with new possibility in their eyes. Gray Owl Woman pulled Tala aside at one point, her weathered face soft with emotion. Your grandmother would have loved to see this day, to know her granddaughter found her way home, found her purpose, found her person. I wish she could have been here. She is here. In you. In the knowledge you carry. In the strength you showed. The dead live on through those who remember them and honor what they taught. It was true. Tala carried Red Thread Woman's legacy in her hands every time she prepared medicine, carried her mother's courage every time she stood up for what mattered, carried Winter Moon's memory in the home she now shared with Coda, honoring the woman who'd come before by building a life that was both similar and uniquely her own. The celebration continued until dawn painted the sky gold and pink. As the community began to disperse, Coda and Tala walked back to their lodge, hand in hand, tired but content. Inside, everything was familiar yet transformed. It was still the same space where Tala had first woken half-frozen and desperate. But now it was truly home, shared fully and equally, built on partnership and love rather than necessity. That summer, Tala expanded her healing practice, treating people from all the mountain bands. Her reputation grew. Mothers brought sick children. Warriors brought injuries. Elders brought the aches of age. She treated them all with the knowledge Gray Owl Woman had passed to her, constantly learning, constantly improving. Coda continued teaching, but now they taught together. Young people from the community would come to learn hunting, tracking, survival skills. Tala would teach them plant medicine, wound care, the healing arts. They created a partnership that strengthened the entire community's ability to survive and thrive. The miners never returned to the mountains in force. After the rescue, they'd pulled back to lower elevations, focusing their operations away from Apache territory. Occasional prospectors still tried their luck in the high country, but they learned quickly to respect the boundaries or face consequences. Frank died the following winter, frozen to death in a drunken stupor outside a saloon. When word reached the mountains, Tala felt nothing. No grief, no satisfaction. Just a distant acknowledgement that a chapter of her life had closed completely. McCready left the territory entirely, his wounded shoulder never healing properly, his reputation ruined by the story of how mountain people had outmaneuvered him. The camp at Iron Hollow Ridge eventually played out, the easy gold extracted, the miners moving on to new strikes in new valleys. Nature began reclaiming the scarred land, slowly erasing the evidence of their presence. Tala gave birth to their first child in the spring of her second year on the mountain, a daughter they named Dawn Rising, for the way she'd arrived with the sunrise. Gray Owl Woman attended the birth, guiding Tala through labor with the same patience she'd shown in all their lessons. Holding her daughter for the first time, Tala thought about her mother Margaret, who'd carried so much pain and secrecy, about her grandmother Red Thread Woman, whose legacy had reached across generations to save her granddaughter, about Winter Moon, whose dress she'd worn and whose space she'd filled without erasing the woman who'd come before. "Welcome to the mountain, little one," she whispered to her daughter. "You're born free. You'll grow up knowing who you are, where you come from, and what you're capable of. No one will ever make you feel less than whole." Coda stood beside her, his hand gentle on their daughter's head. "She has your strength already. I can see it. And your stubbornness. A dangerous combination." They smiled at each other over their child's head, partners in every sense of the word. The years unfolded. More children came. 2 sons who inherited their father's quiet intensity and their mother's fierce determination. The family grew. The community thrived. Tala's reputation as a healer spread beyond the mountain, to the point where people would travel for days seeking her help. Gray Owl Woman eventually passed, dying peacefully in her sleep at an age no one could precisely determine. Before she died, she told Tala, "You've learned everything I can teach you. Now you must teach others. Keep the knowledge alive. Pass it forward." So Tala took apprentices, young people eager to learn the healing arts. She taught them the same way Gray Owl Woman had taught her, with patience, with rigor, with an insistence on precision and respect for the plants and the traditions. Standing Tall lived to see Tala's children grow, watching with satisfaction as the community remained strong despite the pressures of a changing world. Before his death, he told Coda, "Bringing her here was the best thing you ever did. She strengthened all of us. The mountain chose well when it brought her to your shelter." 20 years after stumbling half-frozen into Coda's shelter, Tala sat outside their lodge watching the sunset paint the peaks in shades of amber and rose. Her hair held streaks of gray now. Her hands bore the scars of countless hours of work. Her back still carried the marks of McCready's whip, though they'd faded to thin white lines. Her children played nearby, her daughter teaching her younger brothers how to identify medicinal plants. Morning Light visited often, now an elder herself, bringing news from the other camps. The community remained strong, adapting to changes in the world below, while holding fast to the traditions that defined them. Coda emerged from the lodge and settled beside her, his hair more silver than black now, his face weathered by decades of mountain sun and wind. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the light fade and the stars emerge. "Do you ever think about the girl you used to be?" he asked. "The one who ran into the mountains expecting to die?" "Sometimes. She seems like a stranger now, so young, so afraid, so certain she had nothing to offer the world. And now?" Tala looked at everything they'd built, the lodge that had expanded over the years, the garden she'd cultivated with plants both wild and purposefully grown. the children who carried forward the best of both their legacies, the community that had claimed her and been claimed in return. Now I know that the girl who ran into the mountains did die, and from her death someone stronger was born. Tala, fire that returns, healer, mother, partner, exactly who I was always meant to be. Coda took her hand, their fingers interlacing with the ease of long practice. The mountain gave me back my life when I thought it was over. Gave me you, gave me purpose again. The mountain gives what it gives and takes what it takes. We're just lucky it chose to give us each other. They sat together as full darkness fell and the temperature dropped, eventually moving inside to the warmth of their fire. The children settled onto their sleeping furs, drowsy from the day's activities. Tala and Coda moved around the lodge in their accustomed patterns, banking the fire, preparing for another night, doing the 1,000 small tasks that constituted a shared life. Before sleep, Tala opened her grandmother's locket one final time, reading the words she'd long since memorized. She who walks 2 paths will find her home in the mountains. The prophecy had come true in ways her mother never could have predicted. Tala had walked between 2 worlds, white and Apache, civilized and wild, lost and found, and discovered that home wasn't about choosing one path or the other. Home was about claiming all of who you were, about refusing to be diminished by those who couldn't see your worth, about finding people who recognized your value and helped you recognize it yourself, about building something lasting from the raw materials of courage and choice and love. Tala closed the locket and set it aside, then settled onto the furs beside Coda. His arm came around her automatically, pulling her close, and she fit against him the way she'd fit against him for 20 years, perfectly, naturally, like 2 pieces of the same whole. Outside, the mountain stood eternal and indifferent, caring nothing for the small human dramas played out across its slopes. But within the shelter of stone and timber, beneath firs and surrounded by the people she loved, Tala had found what she'd sought that desperate night when she'd fled into the frozen darkness. Not rescue, not survival, but a life earned through courage, built through partnership, and sustained through the kind of love that grew deeper with each passing season. The fire that had nearly died on that mountainside so long ago now burned steady and strong, fed by the breath of a woman who'd learned that freedom wasn't something given or granted. It was something claimed, defended, and shared with those brave enough to tend the flame together. Tala closed her eyes and let sleep take her, secure in the knowledge that when morning came, she would wake in the place she belonged, beside the person who saw her completely, surrounded by the life she'd chosen and the legacy she would pass forward. She was home, and home was exactly where the mountain had always meant for her to be.